My wife never expected that cheating would destroy everything for both her and her affair partner. I've always seen my wife as my closest confidant, someone dependable and trustworthy. So it was a shock when she took a wrong turn and faced the consequences. Tonight, I hoped for a bonus, but I had doubts. It was the first time in 3 years I wore my dark blue tuxedo, looking sharp yet feeling out of place. Instead of relaxing in my favorite chair with a drink, I found myself at a fundraiser with colleagues and houses, a big social event in our small Midwest town. I had asked my wife to dress up, and she certainly did, maybe too much. She looked stunning but overly tempting. At 35, she was at her peak beauty, turning heads as she descended the stairs in a revealing maroon dress. Despite her allure, she was mine, and I made that clear. While I'd rather be home, my wife seemed comfortable mingling with the city's elite. She had a natural charm, drawing people to her effortlessly. As I returned from the bar, I found her engrossed in conversation with Senator Thomas Norberto, a charming figure often compared to Tom Sitch. His presence seemed to captivate her like never before, leaving me feeling like a bystander to her infatuation. Noticing they ignored me, I stepped in, politely reminding the senator of my seat. He continued chatting with my delighted wife, so I intervened more assertively, placing drinks between them until he got the message. When he finally acknowledged my presence, he announced he'd leave to find his seat, dismissing me. Fuming, I returned to my place, calling him foolish. My wife defended him, claiming I was rude to a senator. I reminded her of our relationship boundaries, but she rolled her eyes, a move I always disliked. Avoiding a scene, I dropped the matter. Dinner passed and the band resumed playing. I invited my wife to dance, but she refused, leaving me disappointed. While I chatted with others, I kept an eye on the senator, who eventually left for the veranda. Concerned, I found him there, arm around my wife, engaged in a serious conversation. I intervened, but someone stopped me, warning not to mess with the senator. "I'm warning you, that's my wife he's touching," I gritted out as I was pushed back into the ballroom. Demanding he retrieve her, I threatened a scene. He cursed quietly, turning back to the senator. He returned, appearing flustered, claiming ignorance. I grabbed her hand, leading her out. The ride home started in silence, but I knew it wouldn't last. She unleashed, accusing me of humiliating her. I defended my boundaries, reminding her of our marriage. "You're being possessive, crossing a line. You acted like a love-struck teen," she retorted, blushing. She remained silent, conceding my point. Our tension affected the kids, dinner becoming awkward. On Wednesday, she insisted on a serious talk, never a good sign. It ended poorly. She revealed plans to attend another fundraiser with the senator, calling it a non-date. I objected, questioning the appropriateness. She denied any wrongdoing, claiming innocence. I challenged her definition of a date, citing a double standard with her friend Angie. Her reaction confirmed my suspicions. She had issues with Angie, known for her charm. "It's completely different, you know that," she argued, claiming a date with a U.S. senator wasn't the same as a regular date. "There's a big distinction, right, Hess? You can't go out with another guy, we're married, remember?" I reminded her, emphasizing our vows. "You don't own me, Reggie, even though we're married," she retorted. "I can do what I want. I'm not saying you're my property, but you're the mother of our kids. I don't want to break up our family," I pleaded, hoping to reach her. "You're being ridiculous," she dismissed, refusing to acknowledge the seriousness of the situation. I was shocked when Hester appeared in a stunning white gown for her date. Our kids were amazed, asking why she was dressed up. She struggled to explain, but I intervened, bluntly stating the truth. As the doorbell rang, I confronted her with a choice, him or us. She opened the door to a security guard, revealing a black limo outside. "Remember to behave for Daddy," she said before leaving. I assumed it was her, stunned momentarily before focusing on my kids who needed attention. Drowning sorrows in booze wasn't an option. I planned a few FaceTime calls, one to my parents, one to hers. The kids enjoyed chatting with their grandparents. Starting with Hester's parents, I anticipated her recent actions would upset them. We laughed until Hester's absence was noticed. "Where's my daughter, Reggie? Have you hidden her?" my mother-in-law joked. I softly explained Hester was on a date with Senator Thomas Norberto, expecting her return the next day. Shocked, my in-laws couldn't believe I let her go. I tried reasoning with her, emphasizing family neglect, but she seemed convinced it was acceptable. The kids took over the conversation, a welcome distraction. Later, I called my parents, receiving less sympathetic advice from my mother, who recommended a lawyer. After a few calls, I ordered pizza, watched a Disney movie with the kids, and struggled to sleep, distracted by ESPN. In the morning, I made pancakes and bacon, reassuring the kids their mom would return soon, even if it was uncertain. There was no rush to come home after spending the night with another man. The black limo arrived in our driveway around 1 p.m., catching the attention of our kids and neighbors. Usually they'd rush to greet their mom, but this time they stayed put, disappointed by her lackluster appearance. She still wore the same dress from the night before, now wrinkled and tired-looking. I sat in the living room as she entered, showing no eagerness to greet her. "Hey," she greeted, acknowledging our night apart. "Looks like you." "And the kids managed without me," I replied sharply. She headed upstairs, asking for rest and a shower. I raised my hands in mocked surrender, realizing our relationship was over. Now, I focused on making things easy for my kids, avoiding becoming a weekend-only father. The question lingered, could I stay until the kids graduated high school? When Hester finally came downstairs at 7 p.m., I'd already made dinner. I mentioned leftovers in the fridge, receiving a faint smile. The kids sensed tension and kept their distance. Alone, Hester accused me of poisoning their minds. I denied it, highlighting the impact of her actions on them and our neighbors. "I didn't break up our family," she defended, shifting blame to me. "It's up to you. If you can work on your ego issues, we can heal and keep our family together. But if you continue being petty and nasty, we'll have to go our separate ways, and you can be Mr. Part-Time Dad," she warned, catching me off guard. I had expected regret, not resistance and anger. "It's 1 in the afternoon, you idiot," I retorted. "You couldn't get enough last night? Needed a half-day fling, huh?" She paused, avoiding my gaze. "We can get past this and go back to how things were. I know I hurt you and I'm sorry, but I needed this for myself, and I don't regret it," she said unapologetically. "That's a terrible apology if that's what it is," I remarked. "You're only sorry for hurting me, not for anything else." "It was amazing for you," she said defensively. My response matched her conviction. "Your actions betrayed our vows and our family." I recounted how surprised she was when I found her in our guest bedroom. "We can't move forward unless you try," she pleaded. "No, it's too late now," I clarified, locking her out of the room. I slept soundly that night, exhausted from 48 hours of tension. The next morning, I continued our Sunday brunch tradition, making Belgian waffles. "Mom looks rough, like she hasn't slept," Ellie observed as we sat down to eat. "Maybe you should go out more on Friday nights," I suggested. Hess burst into tears and fled to the bedroom, leaving the children puzzled. "Did I say something wrong?" Ellie innocently asked. "No, sweetheart, Mommy probably just missed the waffles," I reassured softly. Later, as I relaxed in my lazy boy, watching the Cubs game, the bedroom door slammed open, and a frantic Hester stormed in, ranting incoherently. "Calm down, honey, I can't understand you with all the drooling and spitting," I remarked. She sobbed, accusing me of making her seem promiscuous to her parents. "What a Kardashian mommy," Elise asked, joining the scene. I exchanged a glance with Hester, who composed herself and sent the kids to their rooms before confronting me. "Tell me," she demanded. "As soon as the kids were out of earshot, I saw no reason to hide it from her parents since you were just following a senator to a fundraiser. If they agree with me, it's not my fault. And by the way, my mom had a similar reaction, so watch out next time she's near." "No, it's not like that," she began, then stopped abruptly. "An amazing experience?" I interjected. If looks could kill, I'd be a stain on the chair, but it didn't bother me much. I gestured for her to move so I could see the TV before she hurried out of the room. For the following 2 weeks, I slept in the guest room. Noticing this, I told the kids that I had a cold and didn't want their mother to catch it. I assumed Eliza had figured out my deception, but she prudently kept it to herself without saying anything. A 7-year-old child demonstrating such impressive intelligence surprised me. One night, an hour after Hess had gone upstairs, I returned to our shared bed and softly climbed in next to her. When the alarm went off the next morning, she snuggled up next to me. "It feels great," she muttered. "It's time to come to your senses." She attempted to touch me, but I stopped her by placing my hand on her forearm and drawing her hand away. I adjusted our position so that we were facing each other on the bed. Certain acts are best performed when you can make direct eye contact. "Before I decide to sleep with you again, you will have to get tested and provide me with the results," I said softly. "You might be willing to trust the senator, but I am not." Tears welled in her eyes. She appeared to be about to say something but then decided not to. Instead, she simply nodded. It revealed to me that she and the senator were not using protection. The scenario was growing more intriguing. Originally, I planned to stay until the kids finished high school, roughly another 14 years until Nate headed to college. My love for them made me willing to endure, but the prospect of long-term closeness absence, especially with an attractive woman under the same roof, seemed untenable. Despite concerns about my reputation, my feelings for her had dwindled over the past 2 weeks. Seeing her leave the bed with sadness no longer stirred me as it once did. My own pain prevented me from offering comfort. Who was she now? The woman I married would have understood my disapproval of her seeing someone else. Hester and I met in college, started dating 3 months later, and married within 2 years. She worked as an actuary, a job requiring precision and honesty, traits that balanced my spontaneity and humor. Despite our differences, I envisioned celebrating 50 years of marriage. Senator Thomas Norberto unexpectedly became a part of our lives. 10 days after returning to our shared bed, Hester handed me an envelope as I came home from work. Inside was her clear bill of health. "Hope you're satisfied," she coldly whispered. "You have no idea how humiliating this was. I may never face Dr. Sanj again." "Not my fault, baby," I replied plainly. "Stay faithful and you won't be embarrassed." She hissed softly but couldn't retort. As she walked away, I pressed on. "How often has the senator contacted you?" she began, but I silenced her with a gesture. With a grimace, she handed over her phone. I found texts and calls from him, but no evidence of further meetings. "Damn it," I exclaimed. "We're on thin ice." "Agreed," she returned seriously, pocketing her phone and heading to the kitchen. That night, she showed me affection in bed, and instinct took over. I didn't have feelings for her, I just fulfilled my needs. I knew she tried to win me back, but I was preoccupied. Hester's abrupt return home sparked neighborhood gossip. Sympathetic looks from men and smirks from women hinted at rumors. One evening, Eliza approached me asking about a women's club. I kept my composure, explaining Mommy's mistake and reassuring her. I hugged her, concealing my emotions, knowing this moment would haunt me forever. A feeling of normalcy gradually returned to our household, at least as far as I could see. Yet, it was a different kind of normal. Whether Hess admitted it or not, things would never revert to how they were before that day. I couldn't fully trust her again, nor could I forgive or forget the profound disrespect she had shown me and our family. Love, to borrow from Tina Turner. What does love have to do with any of this? 6 months later, Hess seemed to grasp something or find the courage to speak up. Following that evening, which she instigated, I turned away from her to sleep, as had become customary since then. Before she said anything, I could hear her crying. Reggie, can we talk?" "What's up?" she asked meekly. "Sure," I sighed. "Could you please turn around?" Her tone conveyed clear irritation as she inquired. I sighed again, trying to mask my frustration, then I turned to meet her gaze. She kept glancing at my eyes. "Do you realize how long it's been since we were close? Say it," I insisted. "You had the courage to do it. Have the bravery to admit it." "We haven't been close since I went on a date," she said. "I noticed," I said. "You satisfy me physically, then sleep. You ensure I'm happy, but it feels purely physical, and you haven't hugged me since. I miss that closeness." "You can't even say those words, baby." I replied, "Your date, you cheated on me with him. Admit it, I'm not stupid. You go on a date and don't come back until the next day. You make it seem cheap and disgusting," she protested. "Yes, we were making love on Saturday night, and it was great. He was gentle and caring, just like you, really. It was an unforgettable experience. That's why we're not making love anymore." "Yes, don't you see? You gave him something that, as you promised, was exclusively mine. And you enjoyed everything. It was unforgettable, as you said. Come on, Ree. It was only one night, 2 days. From a statistical standpoint, this is little compared to the hundreds of days we'll spend married. We can forget it, Reg, if you're willing to try," she pleaded. "Thanks for the math lesson, but I've never seen our marriage as a math problem. Would you feel the same if I did it with Mary Jo Young?" "Mary Jo Young," she exclaimed, puzzled. The narrative continues with Reggie and Hester's turbulent relationship, reflecting ongoing emotional tension, unresolved issues, and the struggles of reconciling after betrayal. Mary Jo Young, a divorced blonde with a nice figure, lives close by. Almost every woman on our street watches her closely with her husband. "Wait, are you suggesting you want Mary Jo?" "No way," she exclaimed. "Listen to your inner voice. I never said I wanted Mary Jo, that was you." "I was just wondering how you'd react if I did," I clarified. She looked puzzled until it clicked, then her expression turned angry. "I can read between the lines, no need for words," I replied smugly. She avoided eye contact. "Do you realize, because of what happened, the other girls in the neighborhood bullied Eliza? They overheard their mothers calling you names. It wasn't pleasant," I informed her. Her anger shifted to disbelief at the news. "Eliza never mentioned it," she said, taking a breath, processing. "I'm truly sorry." "Sorry isn't enough. You call the night unforgettable. It was unforgettable, but for betrayal," I declared. With that, I turned away and went to bed, unaware of her next move. Credit is due to Hester. Over the next few months, she committed herself to being an exceptional mother. Traditionally, I had been the primary caregiver for our children, but suddenly Hester took on her share of responsibilities, driving the kids to their various activities and offering them warm support. It made me wonder if she had finally realized that prioritizing our family over her own desires was essential to keeping us together. What a revelation. The children seemed to appreciate the extra attention, but once again, my daughter demonstrated her remarkable receptiveness beyond her 8 years. "Mom is really trying, Daddy," she said to me one day. "I hope she gets a proper apology for whatever she did wrong." I tried to respond with a genuine smile, acknowledging her keen awareness of the world around her. Everything appeared normal in the Wilkerson household. I worked diligently to maintain appearances. As for Hester, she seemed eager to make tremendous efforts, not only to uphold appearances but also to regain my favor. We were two individuals sharing a roof and enjoying certain benefits. Despite her strong desire for normalcy, she expected me to give in eventually. Somewhere within me, remnants of my affection for her remained. However, I couldn't erase 9 years of having her as the focal point of my life. She made things harder for herself by maintaining communication with Senator Prick. I checked her phone calls and messages shortly after her date. She made sure they were clear, yet she didn't realize how easy it was to clone a phone and access all communications. He seemed to keep in touch regularly while she tried to keep him at arm's length, at least for now. "Can we schedule another date soon? I'll be in town," he texted nearly a month ago. "My hubby is still upset from last time," she replied. "I can't risk it." Needless to say, I wasn't impressed. A month later, we marked our 10th anniversary with a family trip to Chuck E. Cheese. The kids had a blast, but Hester didn't. She waited until the kids were playing games before expressing her disappointment with me. "We've always marked our anniversaries just the two of us with a special night. You're altering tradition because you're still holding a grudge. When did you become so petty and small?" she remarked. Once more, the answer to that question is similar to many others about your date. "You did this to me, to us, and to yourself," I replied. "Can't you move past this?" she pleaded. "How often do you two communicate?" I asked directly. She dared to smirk before reaching into her pocket, retrieving her phone and handing it to me. I tossed it high into the air and caught it easily when it fell. "I understand you've been disloyal, but I also acknowledge your intelligence. I bet there's no evidence of your affair on that phone, not since I confiscated it the first time. However, there are records of past texts and calls that you may not have initiated, but I've never heard you explicitly reject the person. Why is that?" Her cheeks flushed as she looked away. "Yes, I knew that was a rhetorical question," I muttered. "Amidst this turmoil, my career and my children provided stability, though my colleagues often remarked that I looked like I needed a good night's sleep, or even 6. I was convinced I was developing an ulcer. My hard drink consumption had increased and sleep was elusive. There were nights when I lay awake for hours, staring at my wife, wondering what went wrong. She insisted on loving me, justifying her actions as separate from our relationship. She felt entitled to her night out with Senator Prick and showed no guilt for her behavior, only regret for the injury she caused me. I waited for the other shoe to drop. Surprisingly, my mother-in-law became a source of strength during this challenging time. She repeatedly expressed regret for her daughter's actions. "We apologize, Reggie. We didn't raise her to be this selfish, but I really hope you can find a way to move past this," she said during one of her calls to check on me. I knew what she was doing for the children. As I headed to the kitchen, I grabbed another cooler of beer to take outside. We were having our usual monthly summer picnic in the neighborhood. Outside, we had 2 grills going, offering a variety of hot and cold dishes, fruits, desserts, and drinks. The weather was perfect, sunny and 80 degrees Fahrenheit with hardly a breeze. The gathering had started a few hours ago and was expected to continue for another 5 or 6. These gatherings were always enjoyable for both kids and adults alike. As I moved through the house, I heard female voices from our home office, typically off limits to non-family. I intended to redirect them to the family room or living area. While most activity happened outside, sometimes someone sought refuge indoors for AC or quiet talks. However, this particular space posed a problem. Yeah, when Reggie takes charge, I can't help but think of him. He's assertive, driven, and focused on his goals. Sometimes I can't shake the memory of that night. "It's something I'll cherish forever," Hester declared to her companion. As I approached the room, I halted in my tracks, my legs weakening, almost stumbling. "Damn, how many people know I'm being betrayed?" I heard laughter. Apparently, there were 3 of them inside. I missed the rest of the conversation as I fought the urge to vomit. I was relieved to reach the restroom before getting sick, emptying everything from the night before, breakfast and lunch. After tidying up, I brought the cooler of beer outside and gave 2 bottles to the guys manning the grills. "Hey, Reg, you all right? You seem a bit off," said John Lazy, casually concerned. "John, I'm good," I replied before drifting away. I stayed quiet for the rest of the gathering. When Hester and her friends returned, I felt eyes on me and noticed smirks aimed my way. Maybe I was losing it, but it seemed like almost every woman at the barbecue was sneering at me. Later that night, after putting the kids to bed and finishing the cleanup, I confronted my wife about my discomfort. She sat on a lounge chair, sipping a wine cooler, looking content. I joined her. "Did anyone show up today who doesn't know about your affair?" I asked sincerely. She looked taken aback. I returned her gaze, pretending innocence. "I might have mentioned it to a couple of girlfriends recently. It was quite the experience," she chuckled. "He's a charming senator I couldn't help but share." "So first you cheat, then you embarrass me in front of your friends. Making every husband aware of your infidelity and branding me as a betrayed man?" I accused. "I'm not unfaithful, and I won't tolerate being labeled as such," she yelled back. "It was just one mistake. I didn't sleep with a stranger in some cheap motel." Her eyes flashed with intensity as she rose from her chair. "I've had enough of this," she declared, her voice growing louder. "You've been playing games for over a year now. Your wife had an affair with another man, a handsome and muscular man. It's time to move forward. I won't be held hostage by your insecurities any longer. If you can't let go, that's your problem. Either file for divorce or face reality. I'm tired of living a lie with you, pretending to be the perfect couple. Decide now." Her outburst caught me off guard, and I sat in stunned silence for what felt like hours. She had already walked away, leaving me alone. Even though I had just regained consciousness, I'm naturally reserved and slow to react, which some, including my wife, interpret as weakness. I seldom panic or act hastily. It pains me to think about not seeing my children every day, but I'm hopeful to salvage my family. I had braced myself for the worst, with a lawyer on standby to fight for me, so I took action. First thing Monday morning, Hester was served with divorce papers at her workplace. Before the day was out, as expected, she was not pleased. About 5 minutes after being served, my phone began buzzing incessantly. Ignoring all her calls, I anticipated the brewing storm upon my return home. Stepping into the house from the garage, Hester exploded in anger. "You fool," she shouted. "Your fragile male ego is bruised and you humiliate me in front of my colleagues. Just as you embarrassed us in front of our friends and neighbors the other day," I retorted. "You practically begged me to file, so I did." She shot me a scornful look, but remained silent. Putting down my belongings, I approached my children for a brief chat, reassuring them of my unwavering love despite us no longer sharing a home starting tomorrow. Elise grasped the situation, having friends with divorced parents, but Nate seemed puzzled. I knew he would struggle, but I was confident my daughter would lend support. Living in a no-fault state made the divorce process seem straightforward. She was expected to receive primary custody of the children, the house, child support, and some alimony. But no, she vehemently contested for some inexplicable reason known only to her. Her lawyer employed various tactics to prolong the proceedings, including insisting on meetings and even suggesting marital counseling. "What's the deal? Have your actions spoken louder than your words? You say you love me, yet you've caused so much turmoil. And then you have the nerve to tell your friends he's the best you've ever had. Why would I want to remain in this marriage if all I get is aggravation? I love my kids, but if I stay with you they'll only remember an embittered man," I expressed in one session. "But I love you, Reggie. Are you fixated on one incident?" "Yes, he was exceptional, but it was a one-time mistake." "Please forgive me," she pleaded. "I can't, Hess," I replied. "You broke our vows and belittled their importance. I can't overlook that. You made promises to me." I hadn't planned to do this, truly I hadn't, but everyone has a breaking point. The beauty of a two-party political system lies in its contrast. Regardless of how you spin it, Senator Prick belonged to one side, meaning the opposing party would welcome anything that tarnished his reputation. Over a year ago, after Hester's affair, I devised a backup plan. I sought the help of a well-connected lawyer in our city to approach the chairman of the opposing political party, who was eager for anything that could damage the senator's chances of re-election and White House aspirations. Despite promising a hefty monetary reward, they eagerly awaited the information. He had to agree that the evidence would only be revealed if the possessor requested it. Every month, my lawyer kept me informed about the chairman's persistent requests. This month, we were ready to fulfill the chairman's demands. The meeting, my first involvement, was set in my lawyer's office. After introductions, I took out a sealed plastic bag from my briefcase and placed it on the conference table. The chairman's surprise was evident upon seeing the bag's contents. "Dear God," he muttered. "Is that what I think it is?" "If you suspect it's evidence that could end Senator Prick's career," I replied, "then yes." They regarded the bag as if it contained precious gold bars. He refrained from touching it, instead continuing to stare in amazement. "That arrogant woman returned home and went upstairs for a shower," I recounted. "Since she handles the laundry, she probably assumed I wouldn't go through the basket. I waited until I heard the water running before entering the bathroom and finding the underwear at the bottom of the hamper. Everyone these days is familiar with DNA from television. I'm confident that when you test these, you'll find 2 distinct sets. Also, here's her toothbrush for DNA comparison. I assume you'll obtain the senator's sample for matching, unless you already have it," I said, giving the chairman a stern look. He reddened and glanced away, just as I anticipated. I knew he grasped all the complexities of the case, so there was no need to reiterate them. However, I sensed his unspoken question in his expression. "Why?" "Because she lacks the intelligence to realize she shouldn't cross me. She betrayed me, yet she arrogantly assumes I'll eventually forgive her. Now she's flaunting it in front of me. To hell with her and the senators she associates with," I declared. "Your career is finished, Thomas. Damn you, Norberto. You foolish woman. How on earth could your weak husband obtain evidence of our weekend together?" Norberto raged at Hester on the phone a week after my meeting with the chairman. "I do not know. I have no clue what you're talking about," she faltered. The phone call caught me off guard. I used to clone hers. I essentially admitted to her that I had tapped her phone some months ago, and that they hadn't been communicating through that means, if at all. "What did you do wrong?" she asked when I returned her call 90 minutes later. I understood what she meant, but I was feeling vengeful, or so I thought. "I just ordered a pepperoni pizza with garlic bread. Why do you care what I eat?" "Wait, how do you know what I eat?" she snapped at me. From past encounters, I could tell she despised my foolish actions. While she may have seemed to view me as feeble, she knew better. Well, I guess being right about 1 thing out of 2 wasn't too bad. I'm not sure how you managed it, but it seems you got back at Senator Norberto in some way. He threatened to rough me up for something you did, though he wouldn't say what. Thanks, by the way. My parents are livid. Yours are too. Eliza has been avoiding me, and you can't seem to grasp that what Thomas and I did was unrelated to our relationship. Yes, about that, I started. Senator Norberto, who was seemingly assured of retaining his seat, suddenly dropped out of the Senate race 8 months before the election, citing significant mental fatigue. With everything else going on in my life, seeking female companionship was the least of my concerns. I hadn't looked at a woman in an appealing way for months until my daughter brought it up. "Daddy, when do you plan to start seeing other women?" Eliza asked casually. My children joined me for the second weekend. "Linda's mom really wants to go out with you," she continued. I was stunned. My jaw must have dropped. Lost in the chaos of divorce, I hadn't thought much about my future beyond taking care of my kids every other weekend and a few weeks during the summer. "Linda's mom brought it up and you're okay with that?" I asked, surprised. "Well, she didn't directly tell me, Dad," Eliza revealed. "She overheard her talking with Annie's mom, but yeah, I'd be fine with it, Dad. I don't want you to be alone, but please, not Marcy's mom. None of us kids liked her." "Kids pick up on things, Dad." Linda's mom, Julie, had been divorced from her terrible husband for about 5 years. She was a charming, lively blonde with curves who still carried the spirited vibe of her old cheerleading days. I had never considered she might be interested in me. When you're married, you don't think about other women's possibilities, at least I didn't. Was I naive? Elise was quietly keeping an eye on me. "It's okay, Dad, I'm almost 9. I understand about divorce and all. Nate and I will be fine. Just take care of yourself." It seemed like I was back in the dating scene. Linda's mom, Julie, became my first date after re-entering the dating pool, and it felt nice, though somewhat obligatory. I explained to her that emotionally, I wasn't ready for anything serious yet, considering my recent return to dating. She responded with a comforting smile, telling me I didn't owe an explanation to every person I dated. Julie offered valuable advice, almost like a crash course on navigating life with divorced parents. She also mentioned that I would catch the eye of other divorced moms among my children's friends, given my reputation as a good father with a successful career and, well, not unattractive. She blushed a bit when she mentioned the last part. I went on to date Julie and a few other divorced mothers. Sometimes I hardly thought about my ex-wife, Hester, or our past marriage. While I admitted to feeling lonely at times, it wasn't enough to consider reconciling with her. I refused to entertain the idea of her betraying me again. Hester, however, quickly dismissed her affair as a foolish mistake, promising never to repeat it. A foolish mistake? I scoffed. It was poor judgment, a lack of respect, and ultimately selfishness. You prioritized an affair with the senator over your family's well-being. Her mouth opened and closed twice. I sensed her desire to respond, but she remained speechless. I half expected her to persist, despite the fact that she couldn't justify her actions, especially now that contacting the senator seemed pointless. One Saturday during dinner while the kids and I were visiting, my ex-mother-in-law informed me that he had asked Hester never to contact him again. He seemed to think you played a role in his decision to withdraw from the Senate election, and that she didn't intervene enough, she recounted. I raised an eyebrow and continued eating quietly, opting not to comment. A few months later, some guys from work suggested going to a new upscale bar with a dance floor. When I was married, I avoided Thursday evening outings like the plague, but now that I'm single, I found myself going out regularly. 4 of us found a table, ordered drinks, and soaked in the atmosphere of the place. I noticed the 2 women as soon as they walked in. The first woman looked to be in her early 40s, but dressed more in line with individuals over 30, aiming to evoke a youthful vibe. She wore a silk blue shirt, slightly unbuttoned, and a short skirt, accentuating her long, toned legs. With short, dark brown hair and green eyes, she seemed brimming with confidence. On the other hand, her friend seemed out of place in the pub setting, slightly older than her companion, possibly in her early 40s. She exuded refinement and wealth, clad in a sweater and skirt from a high-end store. She radiated elegance and beauty with her shoulder-length silver blonde hair and dark eyes. Seating themselves at a nearby table, the women quickly caught the attention of males, eager to engage or dance with them. I couldn't shake the desire to dance with one of them, particularly the dark-haired woman, who seemed ready for some fun, if not more. She readily accepted dances from every man who approached her. In contrast, the blonde woman danced sparingly and seemed more reserved in her movements. An hour later, I resolved to invite the blonde woman to dance. However, as I approached her table, the brunette grabbed my hand and whisked me onto the dance floor. I became completely captivated by her and forgot about her companion. We danced to upbeat songs until the tempo slowed. When she passionately kissed me, I was entranced. We left the club together and went to my place. Our passion carried over into the bedroom, and that night she shared details of her life. It turned out she and her friend were celebrating her recent divorce. Rosie proved to be an amazing lover, and we dated for about a month before she expressed hesitancy to commit so soon after her divorce. I respected her perspective, and we parted amicably. However, since our initial encounter, I've never had the chance to inquire about her friend, which sparked my curiosity. A few weeks later, I found myself alone in the bar of another upscale establishment, seeking solace with a drink. It wasn't my turn to care for the children, and after a long week, I had the weekend to myself. She entered the room solo, capturing everyone's attention. Her figure resembled Megan Thee Stallion's, with a cascade of rich brown locks framing her face and draping over her shoulders. Striding over in 4-inch stilettos, she settled next to me. Instantly, I felt like I'd stepped into heaven. I scrambled for a clever opening line, but before I could speak, she gazed into my eyes and asked for my drink order. I replied with a sly grin, feeling a twinge of envy at her poise, and my thoughts scattered. "Excellent choice," she purred. A man with impeccable taste, ordering the same undiluted drink as mine. She spent the evening sharing about the boutique marketing company she had founded years ago. Remarkable. Not only was she captivating and intelligent, but she also ran a thriving business. Later, we departed for her charming apartment. She mentioned her preference for lovemaking in her own bed, a common sentiment among women, and delved into the psychology behind it. With her impeccably toned physique, I couldn't believe she was 45. Our first encounter was unforgettable. She was an exceptional kisser, and I felt a connection with her, unlike any since my date with Hester. In just one night, Maria Washington opened up to me more honestly than Hester ever had during our 9-year marriage. Maria confessed her dedication to her career and lack of desire for children, preferring casual relationships with various men. Despite developing genuine feelings for her, knowing a traditional relationship wasn't an option, I agreed to be friends with benefits. For the next year, we met monthly until Maria unexpectedly fell in love with a much younger man. "You're one lucky guy," my ex-mother-in-law would occasionally call me. Despite the divorce, we remained close, bound by mutual understanding and our grandchildren. I still referred to them as Mom and Dad. "Could I ask you a favor, Reggie?" she inquired cautiously. "Of course, as long as it doesn't involve your daughter," I replied. It was a matter of courtesy to take my mother-in-law's request to bring her personal assistant to their upcoming company Christmas party seriously. She's a good-hearted person, Reggie. She went through a divorce a few years ago from an abusive cheater, and I don't think she's dated anyone since. She was hurt, Reggie, and she needs a decent guy to show her that not all men are scoundrels. And I think you're a decent guy, my ex-mother-in-law explained. Isn't it odd when your former mother-in-law tries to set you up on a date? Just one thing, Mom, I interjected. Please tell me she's not boring. Mom caught onto the humor and chuckled. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised, Reggie. You might even let us keep the kids for a night or two, she teased. Mom was spot on. I was pleasantly surprised. Cheryl, or Cherilyn as she preferred, was a delightful bundle of charm with a well-proportioned figure. She was warm without being overly effusive, and she had a delightful habit of wrinkling her nose and squinting her green eyes when she was amused. Equally important, she had a genuinely great personality. I made a point of sticking close to Cherilyn throughout the evening, giving her my full attention, much like I would have with my ex-wife. Cherilyn seemed appreciative of the gesture. While she engaged in conversation, she tended to defer to others, which I suppose was understandable given her upbringing. We sat with my in-laws at a table. Mom was as graceful as ever, while Dad was more reserved at first. I understood his demeanor, but he grew more open as the evening progressed. I surprised Cheryl with my dancing skills, which I had honed to please my ex-wife who loved to dance. Cherilyn also demonstrated proficiency, especially in faster dances, and she complimented me perfectly in slow dances, as if we had been dancing together for years. I savored the feeling of her body against mine as I escorted Cherilyn to the door. She gave me a gentle kiss on the lips and handed me her phone number. I realized I owed my in-laws more time with their grandchildren. After 3 days, I called Cherilyn to ask her out. She agreed to a date the following Friday at one of the city's finest Italian restaurants, followed by an art exhibit at a nearby gallery. Cherilyn dressed more provocatively for our date than she did at the Christmas party, which impressed me even more. We had a wonderful time, and we went out 3 more times before I felt it was time for her to meet my 8-year-old daughter, and for me to meet hers. We spent quality time together, playing mini golf and enjoying a picnic in a nearby park. Overall, I felt it went smoothly, particularly because the 2 girls developed a strong bond. However, as expected for his age, my son wasn't thrilled because he believed all girls had cooties. Sherry and I met several times a week, and when I had my children, we engaged in family activities together, including all 5 of us. Everything was going well until a few weeks into the new school year when I received an unexpected phone call from Hester. I'm not sure what your girlfriend has been teaching my kids, but your son was in the principal's office today for fighting, and his face is all beaten up. He's been suspended for 3 days, and all he can say is that it all started with this Monique girl he keeps calling his sister. She raged over the phone. First and foremost, you have no right to call my girlfriend names like that. I'll come over after dinner and take Nate out for ice cream. Let's not jump to conclusions until we know exactly what happened, I responded calmly. I heard her sigh before she hung up. After dinner, I picked up Nate and took him to a small family-owned ice cream parlor. As soon as he got into my car, I conducted a thorough visual inspection. He had a cut on his lip and a scratch on the left side of his face. You should see the other guy, Dad, he joked. What's the truth, Nathan Abraham? I responded with his full name to emphasize seriousness. He winced at the mention of his first and middle names. A kid was bullying Mo. I told him to leave my sister alone. He threw the first punch, then I punched him hard. They say I broke his nose. It made a loud crack and there was blood everywhere, he explained, trying to hide a grin. The boy who bothered Mo was 2 years older than Nate. Will Mo tell me the same story? I asked. Absolutely, Dad. I wouldn't have punched him if he hadn't thrown the first punch. I was just defending Mo. You always tell me to look out for Allie, so I figured it applied to Mo too. She's really small, Dad, Nate said. Nate had a valid point. Monique inherited her mother's petite stature, making her at least half a head shorter than most of her peers. I had always stressed to Nate the importance of looking out for his sister, and it seemed he now saw Monique as part of his family. It was fascinating how the innocence of childhood sometimes outweighed the wisdom of experience. I commend you for protecting Mo, but let's keep it between us, I told him. I'll speak with the principal and see what can be done. You might want to update your mother on Mo's status. It seems you and Elise haven't been keeping her fully informed about my life, which I appreciate. However, it might be better coming from you and Elise, I said. I mentioned that my 7-year-old understood completely. Children mature quite quickly these days. And Dad, when are you and Sher tying the knot? She's amazing, you know, Nate added. As I mentioned earlier, kids grow up fast, and he was right. It was time to make a commitment to that woman. The following day, I reached out to the principal. The school had a strict zero-tolerance policy for fighting, regardless of whether it was self-defense. However, they also had a zero-tolerance policy for bullying. As a result, the aggressor received a 6-day suspension following interviews with witnesses. Although I disagreed with the policy, I advised Nate not to contest his punishment manually. Furthermore, I assured him of my support and promised to propose to Sherry as soon as I could afford the ring. Things got complicated when Hester discovered Sherry was Mom's personal assistant and that Mom had scheduled their first meeting. "What on earth, Mom? Aren't you supposed to be on my side?" Hester yelled later, according to Mom. "There's no your side," Mom replied. "He's not coming back to you. You completely messed that up, so why let a good man go to waste? Sherilyn is a wonderful woman and a great friend. She deserves someone like Reggie." Mom described Hester's scream as horrifying as she recounted the incident. While both my children enjoyed Sherry's company, my daughter in particular seemed to admire her nurturing demeanor towards me. Sherry had a natural inclination to fulfill my desires, making me feel like the master of my domain. This, in turn, encouraged me to treat her like my queen. Elise seemed to enjoy witnessing the affectionate banter between Sherry and me. "I'm not sure if you two are endearing or nauseating," Elise remarked one day, "but I enjoy being around to witness it." A couple of months later, our lovemaking wedding only included our 3 children, my parents, and my ex-in-laws as guests. The court clerk who officiated the ceremony was surprised when my ex-mother-in-law stood as Sherry's maid of honor. "It's quite a story," I chuckled when she inquired. Nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition to come from the classic British comedy ensemble Monty Python's Flying Circus, but truth be told, nobody expects an inquiry from a federal marshal either. I was taken completely by surprise when 2 officials entered my office on a Monday morning. It seemed the authorities were upset about a certain former senator's altercation and subsequent injury in the restroom of an upscale restaurant in Houston, Texas. My name, along with that of several other aggrieved husbands, emerged as potential suspects. "I can't say I'm sorry to hear about the senator's troubles. Nobody, and I truly mean that, deserves it more," I remarked to the disgruntled marshals. "You do realize that the fool slept with my then-wife almost 4 years ago? If I had any intentions, wouldn't I have acted long before now?" I retorted with heavy sarcasm. However, the grilling from the federal agents was just the beginning. A week later, a reporter from the Associated Press showed up at my office seeking details about the aforementioned incident. It appeared he had somehow obtained a confidential roster of 26 women the senator allegedly had affairs with during his time in office. At this point, several individuals were aware of Hester's rendezvous with the senator, though I certainly didn't publicize it. Over the years, Hester likely disclosed it to more people than I did, as she took pride in her achievement. However, I couldn't help but wonder about her level of pride when news of the senator's misconduct emerged, implicating her as one of his lovers. "Why did you disclose that to him?" She practically yelled at me over the phone. "I didn't," I said. "He informed me that your name was on the senator's roster. All I did was confirm the accuracy of your inclusion on the list. I wasn't going to fabricate to spare you from embarrassment." "Promiscuous? I am not promiscuous," she screamed at me before I ended the call. "I must confess," I chuckled. I also entertained the thought of taking an extended vacation out of town when the news article broke. She messed up, literally, and yet I was going to suffer an embarrassing fallout as well. Sherry talked me out of that notion. "Don't engage in any confrontation. Stick to the truth. She cheated on you. You divorced her. Move on," Sherry advised. Unfortunately, my children were going to endure verbal bullying for the remainder of their school years. We would be addressing the fact that their mother was a self-centered cheater for years to come. I also sympathized greatly with my ex-in-laws, who had become close friends of ours after the article came out. We invited them to stay with us in the house we had purchased for a couple of weeks. During that time, they mostly stayed indoors and avoided answering their phones. "I adore my daughter," you grasp the parental emotions, "but I'm deeply ashamed that she thought it acceptable to engage in promiscuous behavior," Dad confessed. No father wants his daughter to be perceived in that manner. As time elapsed, the scandal dissipated, and life resumed its usual course. Gradually, my children began spending more time with Sherry, Monique, and me at our house. It wasn't formal, but our home naturally evolved into the neighborhood kids' gathering spot. Initially, Hester objected, but I believe things smoothed over. Furthermore, I ensured that Elise and Nate maintained open communication with Hester to prevent her from accusing me of alienating her children again. Mom and Dad's frequent visits helped alleviate tensions when the kids were with me. We seldom discussed Hester. Although she remained their mother, she became an ex in my life. They also refrained from mentioning her out of respect for Sherry, whom they now referred to as Mom. Initially, I sensed discomfort from Hester's parents when the kids started calling Sherry Mom, but that soon faded as they had been close to Sherry even before our marriage. Amidst the upheaval in my life and my family's, I paid scant attention to Hester's affairs. I knew she occasionally dated based on the kids' remarks, but I was startled when Elise announced one afternoon that her mother was engaged. A wave of sadness engulfed me for what might have been. Then I felt a comforting embrace envelop me, and my sorrow swiftly transformed into joy for what I now possessed.
Discovered my cheating spouse's secret Reddit accounts, divorced him, and ruined the AP's marriage. I've been suspicious for quite a long time now, months, and have been quietly investigating on my own. I've been seeing changes in behavior, an uptick in phone usage, and have felt more distance coming from him. Every once in a while, I've gotten a gut feeling that he had been with someone else that day. A few times he had smelled different coming home, and he was slightly distant in behavior. Almost like he didn't want to get too close to me, acting a bit nervous. All this has triggered me into snooping through his phone when he leaves it around and when he's sleeping. I've come across a few apps that I learned are frequently used by people who cheat to communicate with affair partners. I also came across his secret Reddit account and his activity on an adultery sub. This weekend, I was finally able to confirm that he is actively cheating on me. I am effing gutted, and I don't know what to do. He doesn't know that I know, and it has taken everything in me to try to act normal in front of him and the kids. I have confided in one friend because I just don't know how to handle this, and I can barely stop shaking all weekend. She told me to do more investigation to see if I can find out who the affair partner is before I confront him. I never thought I would be here, contemplating divorce. What will happen to my kids? Losing all of our life plans? What the F, I don't really deserve this. All I can think of is what an effing waste. He's ruined everything. Update. Hi everyone. I first want to thank you all for your advice and support. I'm not someone who likes to post or air my personal struggles, but in a very real moment of anxiety, panic, sadness, and a bit of whine, I made this post, and I'm so glad I did. It makes me sad to think of all of you who have gone through this type of betrayal, and at the same time, it has made me feel less alone. I spoke to an attorney today. We are in a no-fault state, so infidelity wouldn't impact a divorce, but if it came to a custody battle, the details of the infidelity might be helpful. I am grateful the attorney has an opening tomorrow, although I don't think I'm quite ready to make any sound decisions. His next opening isn't for 3 weeks, and I want to do as much research as possible before I confront my husband. I don't want to wait 3 weeks for the confrontation, so tomorrow it is. The one friend I've confided in was able to get me an IT specialist who's a family member of hers. He met with me this morning, and he was able to retrieve a lot of helpful information, including the affair partner's identity. I will wait until after I meet with the attorney to decide how to handle the affair partner. I feel like everything is moving very fast, but at the same time, not fast enough. As I know I need to gather all the information and get my ducks in a row before my husband is tipped off. But I also just want to get this confrontation over with. Thank you all again. Community reactions. First off, let me say I'm so sorry you're going through this. I remember that adrenaline rush, the shakes, the stomach knotting up, feeling the absolute rage when you find the evidence. It's literally gutting and incites such a visceral reaction. You're doing everything right. You want to gather as much intel and evidence as you can before confronting him. Don't give him any chance at all to downplay or gaslight. He'll most likely try to say it was just online stuff, which will still be cheating, so if you can get proof it was something physical, definitely save that. I wish all the best for you and your kids. You deserve so much better than some loser using not safe for work subreddits outside of his relationship. OP replies, thank you so much for the advice. I definitely have evidence of a physical affair, at least from the details he has talked about on an adultery sub. It's been very difficult not to confront him. Having the kids around has helped with that though, because I'm trying not to tip them off. They are teenagers, and it will be extremely difficult to hide this from them once the crap hits the fan, which infuriates me even more. Emotions have been all over the place, from I have no other choice but divorce, to how can we fix this, to how the F are the kids going to react when they find out. I'm so resentful that he's placed all this crap on my shoulders. The joys of modern romance. Isn't it lovely when your partner's idea of quality time includes visiting not safe for work subreddits? I can almost hear the vows now, to love, honor, and secretly troll adultery forums till death do us part. Seriously though, I'm sorry you're going through all this. Your sleuthing skills are on point. Nancy Drew would be proud. Just remember, you're not alone. Update 1. This morning, I met with my attorney for over 2 hours. Yesterday, he had sent me a ton of paperwork and a list of things to bring, basically all of our financials. I felt prepared. Meeting with him put me a bit more at ease as far as my own financial future goes, which was a huge concern. We live in a no-fault state, which means infidelity won't have bearing in the event of a divorce. However, if there's a custody battle, which I don't see happening, details of the affair could be useful. I asked my attorney if it would be appropriate to contact the affair partner's husband, and he gave me the green light to do so. Right after my meeting with my attorney, I called the affair partner's husband. It was a short phone call, letting him know about the relationship between our spouses, and that my husband is unaware of my knowledge of the relationship. He asked to call me back, and shortly after, he texted me asking to meet me in person this afternoon. He assured me he would not tell his wife I had contacted him. Well, I just left our meeting. I'm sitting in the car feeling a sense of relief, but also dread. The affair partner's husband has been suspicious for months. They live a few towns over, and we live about an hour away from a major city. My husband spends a great deal of the work week in the city. In fact, we have an apartment there so he can avoid the long commute home during the week when meetings run late, and he has work dinners. The husband says the affair partner has been spending a lot more overnights during the week than was typical in the past few months for work. She had been on her phone a lot more frequently and had become protective of her phone. He saw a flirty text over her shoulder at one point and accused her of cheating about 2 months ago. She had excuses, and he let it go. The majority of their meetups were at our apartment. I told him their message exchanges proved this. A few of my favorites were from her. "I wonder if your wife will smell me on her sheets. I hope she does," was sent when my husband told her of a planned weekend in the city with me and my kids. "Is it wrong that I think of the apartment as our apartment home? Just me and you and our little love nest? An apartment I own half of, by the way." I gave the affair partner's husband a thumb drive of all the evidence I had discovered. There's a lot, and a very detailed spreadsheet of every meetup, dinner, gift, hotel visit, etc., etc. etc. My husband would be very proud of that. He is a spreadsheet guy. The affair partner's significant other asked me to wait a few days to confront my husband to do his own investigating. I gave him the info of my new BFFIT expert and my divorce attorney I've mentioned looking into getting one. One thing I should add, this man is extremely good-looking and very in shape. My husband is a good-looking guy too and takes care of himself, but this guy was really something. I don't know why that surprised me. He was also very kind and sympathetic, which I was relieved about because I was wary of the response I would receive. The plan is to keep in touch so that we can confront both of them at the same time, separately, of course. Community thoughts. So far, the first person says, if it were me and this finally blows up, I'd straight tell my husband, I don't know why the affair partner slept with him, because her husband is way hotter. But I'm a jerk. The next person says, well done. Other betrayed spouses should follow your lead. I was with you 100% right up to the last statement, so that we can confront both of them at the same time separately. Of course. There is no way on this earth I could resist confronting them by having the other betrayed husband walk into the apartment with me when they were together. I wish you the very best. Bravo on the evidence gathering. I'm sure you're right. Your husband will be thrilled to see his beloved spreadsheets used for such a noble cause. Meeting the affair partner's husband must have felt like something out of a spy movie. I mean, who knew infidelity investigation could double as speed dating? Nice touch noticing his good looks and fitness level, because why not? If you're going to endure this dumpster fire, might as well appreciate the view. I wonder if your wife will smell me on her sheets? Really? The only thing she's achieved is proving that cliché lines aren't just for the movies. Sharing a thumb drive with all that dirt is a masterstroke. It's the ultimate thank you next move. Update 2. Spoke to the other betrayed spouse today regarding evidence found and logistics of the confrontation. The other betrayed spouse had said at our meeting that he was going straight to divorce. Reviewing the evidence I provided to him, and then his own investigation eliminated any little doubts he had about divorce. My husband has been in the city for work since Monday, and he comes home tomorrow. The other betrayed spouse and I are both confronting our spouses tomorrow night at the same time, but separately. A question that the other betrayed spouse had asked me was, what was the one date and time that bothered you the most? He said for him it was when the affair partner said she was away in LA for work. Their son is asthmatic, and he had the flu. While she was supposedly in LA, and he was in the ER for over 10 hours with his son, she was actually in the city with my husband. Just 1 hour away, it obviously would have blown her cover to come home. The other betrayed spouse said he was blown away that covering up her own lies was worth more than being there for their son. For me, I think it was when we had planned a 3-day trip to tour my son's top choice of colleges and explore the city of that college. This had been planned for a few months, but a few days before the trip, my husband had a work commitment come up. In messages I found, the affair partner also had a work commitment unexpectedly come up. My husband chose to spend those 3 days with the affair partner rather than spend that time having a pretty amazing experience, helping our son make a choice for his future. Yes, my son got into this college and will be attending this fall. I'm a nervous wreck for tomorrow night's confrontation. Today, the other betrayed spouse said, we're on the same team. We'll get through this. I hope so. Update 3. Do you think we have a good marriage? Yes, of course. Why are you asking this? You're happy in our marriage? You think we have a good marriage? Yes, everything is great. You're scaring me. Why are you asking this? Are you not happy? Right now, I'm not happy. I'm pretty effing miserable right now. Okay, I thought we were happy too, which is why I'm trying to figure out why you're cheating on me. What? Why would you say that? Because you're cheating. How can you say that? Now I'm pissed. I would never do that to you. How? Or could you say that? You know I would never do that. I know you're cheating. Silence. Head in hands, looking at the floor, then jumps off the couch and storms into our bedroom saying, I need a minute. After he returns about 10 minutes later, eyes red like he's been crying, the first thing he says is, what do we do now? I say, I know you've been cheating. I want you to be honest with me. He says, I'm sorry. I'm so effing sorry. The conversation devolves into me asking for details. He goes on to say it was just a fling, it's over, she meant nothing to him, it didn't last long, he doesn't know why he did it, he's sorry, he's so sorry, there were no feelings involved. Both of us were crying, I was crying a lot. At one point I say, I must have done something really terrible to you for you to do this. He says, you've done nothing, it wasn't about you. What was it about? I don't understand. We have this beautiful life, there has to be a reason, and I don't want to hear that you don't know why you did this. And this is what he said, which I can't wrap my head around. Everything with us was great. It's always been great, but I started getting attention from her, and it just happened. I started thinking about the monotony of our life. There are no highs and lows. It just felt exciting, I guess, and once it started, I wasn't able to stop. It was like the adrenaline took over. My response was, let me get this straight, you started effing someone else, sneaking around, lying, and blew up our entire life because we were too happy? He admitted it sounded stupid saying it out loud, but it's just how he felt. I asked who she is. He wouldn't answer. He said she has a husband and kids, and he didn't want to wreck that. What about our marriage? Me? Our kids? It says so much that you were choosing to protect her and her family over us. He said, it's not like that. At this point, I told him he had to leave, which he resisted at first, but I was literally breaking down and so upset, and I told him I couldn't be around him. So I packed up, with him coming to me every few minutes to check on me and say, I'm so sorry. My brother showed up as he was packing. I told him I already have a divorce attorney working on things and that he needed to get an attorney. This shocked him. You can't just decide on your own we are done. We have to talk about this. We can work through this. There's the kids to think about. My only response was, it seems to me you and affair partner's name already decided this for us. Don't worry, she's having just as crappy of a night as you are. This made my brothers laugh. My soon-to-be ex looked surprised at the mention of the affair partner's name. My oldest brother walked out with him, and I saw them arguing out in the driveway. Then he left. I spoke to the other betrayed spouse briefly last night and again this morning. This has gotten long, so I will do a short update in another post, maybe tomorrow. But as a mini update, the affair partner is at a hotel right now. Community thoughts? First, oh, big hugs, OP. His responses really say it all, don't they? Deny, ask what you know, say it's over, blame the affair partner, protect the affair partner. You did nothing wrong, it's all about him. While you may not like confrontations, you handled this one perfectly. Kudos to your family for supporting you when life is messy. OP replies, thank you. I called him a cliché with the whole playbook he was using. Next person says, bosom you. They are, for some reason, always trying to protect the piece of crap they cheated with. Always. My wayward husband still does this. OP replies, I specifically wanted to ask about her identity because I had to read so much of the adultery sub I first caught him on about protect the affair partner at all costs. I wanted to see if he would do this. He didn't mention her name once in the 2-hour conversation we had, and so that's why I asked towards the end. One more person says, so gross. It really goes to show that he doesn't feel remorse. He doubled down when he protected the affair partner at all costs. It's kind of crazy that you know of his secret Reddit and therefore have access to so much of his inner dialogue. Did you screenshot many of his posts? He may delete all of it now if he suspects you found it. OP replies, I have screenshots of everything. First, he denies everything. Then he plays the I need a minute card, and finally, he confesses while still trying to protect his precious affair partner. Classic. It's almost laughable that he tried to convince you that everything was fine in your marriage right before you dropped the cheating bombshell. His response, total shock, because who could have guessed that sneaking around and betraying your family might lead to some consequences? And the affair partner's husband, what a champ. He's got his ducks in a row, filing for divorce faster than your husband can say, it was just a fling. The fact that the affair partner chose to stay with your husband while her kid was in the ER really speaks volumes. Mother of the Year material right there. When you mentioned your son's college trip, it's clear that your husband's priorities were right where they shouldn't be. I mean, skipping a meaningful family event for a tryst? That's a new level of selfish. Your confrontation strategy is solid. I love the bit where you told him you already have a divorce attorney talk about a power move. Good on you for having screenshots of everything. You've got all the evidence you need to show the court who he really is. Stay strong. You're handling this like a boss, and there's no doubt you'll come out on top. Update 4. This morning we talked with the kids. Anonymous or not, I'm not going to get too detailed about the discussion to protect my kids' privacy. I feel it's unfair to dive too deeply here. About their most vulnerable moments. Kids ages 14, 16, 17, almost 18. Beforehand, I had spoken to X's name about this talk, telling him the information my therapist gave me on the healthiest way to approach it. I told him that he should be the one doing the talking because, well, we all know why. He did not want to have this talk, felt like it was too soon. And what if we work things out? It would just confuse them and get them upset for nothing. I then explained that they will know something is up because he will no longer be living with us. The only thing to work out going further is a CO parenting plan. He tried to engage in a discussion about us. I declined the offer and kept it about the game plan of the conversation about the kids. We sat down with the kids when they came home from my sister's house. My ex started the discussion using the very vague explanation the therapist suggested. We are having problems, can't find a resolution to those problems, and I think it's best for Dad to move out for a while so it doesn't affect the kids. There won't be a lot of difference in our home life since Dad spends much of the week in the city, and Dad will be able to spend time with them on the weekends. Silence from all three kids. Oldest. You're cheating on Mom, aren't you? Other two chime in. Stop! He would never do that. Arguing amongst the three kids. X says nothing. I ask them to calm down so we can talk. Oldest. Everything's been fine. We'd know if you two have not been getting along. You're cheating, aren't you? It has to be that. X is silent, won't say a thing. I said to him, you have to tell them. Silence. Me to the kids. Yes. All three start yelling and crying. How could you do this? Why would you do this? Are you getting a divorce? Lots of yelling and crying. I hate you. On and on and on. X, I know you're all upset. You have a right to be. I've let you down, but this has nothing to do with you. It's between me and Mom. I think he might have said this as a way to let them know this isn't their fault, but it backfired. Or how can you say it has nothing to do with us? It has everything to do with us. My oldest called him a hypocrite. Always telling us to respect women, lecturing me about how to treat my girlfriend, and you're effing around on Mom? There was a lot more conversation, most of it the kids saying things in anger and X apologizing. When things calmed down, I told them that they can go to my brother's house, that I needed to talk to Dad privately. All my brothers, my sister, and spouses had gathered at my brother's house, knowing I was telling the kids and thinking having their cousins around afterward might be a support for them. Before they left, my oldest said, Mom, he's not staying here, right? Like, he's not coming back here, right? I mean, there's no coming back from this, you know that, right? Once the kids left, I told him he should pack more stuff while we are all gone. He said, don't you want to talk? I said, what else is there to say? I'm effing traumatized having to sit and watch these kids go through that. Now are you thinking of the consequences? Were the effing lows worth it? I told him to text me when he's gone so I know he won't be here when I get back. Community thoughts. First up, oh boy, my heart really goes out to your kids. Your oldest sounds like he will have the hardest time with this. He also sounds like he will be a fine young man. Your post really drives home the devastation cheating causes. For what? To get your rocks off? A few minutes of jollies? It is, in itself, the most selfish act there could be. Again, you handled your business like a boss. Your soon-to-be ex-husband with, don't you want to stay and talk? I'm sorry, did he just meet you? Did he not know what would happen when you eventually found out? Stay strong, OP. When you find out, let us know how the other betrayed spouse ended up handling his business. Next person says, despite what many may think, I strongly believe that it's vitally important for older children to be told the truth in an age-appropriate manner about the real reason for their parents' relationship. Breakdown when it's due to infidelity. Kids are intuitive, so hiding the truth just compounds their confusion, hurt, and sense of betrayal. It's bad enough that their wayward parent has intentionally deceived this entire family. The last thing they need is to be continually lied to by everyone else. Honesty and transparency are particularly important when dealing with teenagers. OP, you did the right thing because your babies need to know the truth to be able to start making sense of what's happening. I have to admit that reading your children's reactions was heartbreaking. The hurt experienced by the betrayed is the reason why I always reiterate that infidelity is so traumatizing for the betrayed spouse and their kids. Because it's a form of emotional and psychological abuse. It's important that waywards understand the profound, long-lasting damage they're causing, and the abuse they're inflicting when they choose to cheat. Your wayward husband really is a selfish, self-seeking coward for willfully destroying his innocent family in such a cruel manner. As painful as it was, you truly handled the situation like a queen. Please ensure to get your kids into individual counseling as soon as possible and find a good infidelity trauma therapist for yourself. OP replies, I had a session with my therapist about strategies for kids' age groups. She had said to present it in a vague, bare-bones way we had presented it, and then answer questions honestly. She said many teens already have suspicions of the cause of the breakup. Some teens will want to discuss their suspicions, some won't. By using the strategy she suggested, it gives the teens agency. It gives them the power of deciding what they are capable of. Hearing. I explained all of this to X's name, which made me even more frustrated in his silence. I'm that parent that will go to therapy when my kids are going through crap. I'm a Montessori-trained teacher, although I've been a stay-at-home mom since they were babies and have raised my kids on that philosophy. If your kids are going through crap, what are you doing as a parent to trigger it, and what can you do as a parent to help them cope? This moment was meant to, at a minimum, establish trust between X's name and the kids, and he blew it. Nothing quite like a good old confession to bring everyone closer together, right? The highlight has to be your oldest calling him a hypocrite. I mean, it's not every day you get schooled by your kid on respect and integrity. I hope your ex took some notes during that lecture. And your exit line asking if the lows were worth it? Brilliant. It's like you're in a drama and he's realizing he's the villain. And let's not forget that plea from your son, make sure this guy doesn't come back. It's clear your kids are smart cookies and they see right through the BS. Update 5, hi all. I'm sorry for my delayed update. It's been a roller coaster ride of so many emotions to deal with. Emotions of my own, my kids, and some family. My mother-in-law and father-in-law returned from vacation last week, and they are having a really hard time with it all. My ex's name and his siblings sat down with them to break the news, and they are devastated. My mother-in-law has called me every day to be a support system, but the conversation usually turns into her saying, "I didn't raise him to be this way," and crying. My father-in-law tried to talk me into reconciliation for the kids. I know he is coming from a genuine place, as they are both very worried about the kids, so I'm trying to be patient with him. He's very disappointed in my soon-to-be ex and has had to put a pause on our conversations because he has been brought to tears. The kids have started therapy. They have opted for group sessions together. Their therapist has encouraged this approach as he says it will help their healing process to learn to be a healthy support system to each other. Reconciliation with their father will be a long process and might look different for each of the kids. Group sessions will help each of them to accept their individual journeys toward reconciliation with their father, so it will not damage the sibling relationship. My ex and I had our first proper conversation about the affair and our separation, divorce. He still wants reconciliation, I do not. Something I asked him was, if roles were reversed, would you forgive me? We both know he wouldn't. His response was, you're a better person than I am. Basically, he was expecting that if he were to get caught, I would give him a chance to reconcile. He never thought I would decide on divorce. I said, you have higher expectations for me than you do for yourself. Do you think that's fair? I had a session with my therapist since our talk. Maybe some of you might have insight on this. My therapist said what my soon-to-be ex said is very common in wayward people. They don't think the relationship will end without being given the opportunity for reconciliation. They feel entitled to reconciliation because they spent so much time blaming their betrayed spouse to excuse their infidelity. Has anyone else experienced this? Last week, there were an array of emotions: anger, sadness, grief, anger. The last few days, I felt detached. Many people have asked for updates on the other betrayed spouse. I feel like he is much further along in this crazy process than I am, probably because he had suspected his wife's infidelity for a number of years. The affair partner is staying with her sister as far as I know. There's been no contact between her and my soon-to-be ex. The other betrayed spouse says the affair partner is angry at my soon-to-be ex because she thought they would be together. She threw that in the other betrayed spouse's face when he confronted her, and now she has egg on her face. I have shown the other betrayed spouse all of my posts and all of your words of support and advice. I felt it was only fair he knew I was posting our business. I'm trying to talk him into joining Reddit, if only to peruse these support subs, as I found them so helpful. He says he's not a social media guy, but he'll think about it. Thank you all so much for your advice and support. I know I've been absent, and so many of you have commented and sent me messages to check in on me. Having these outlets available has been such comfort for me, I can't properly express how much. The family drama intensifies. It sounds like your soon-to-be ex's infidelity is the gift that keeps on giving, spreading joy and heartbreak to everyone involved. Your mother-in-law's daily calls must be a real treat. I can only imagine the uplifting conversations. I didn't raise him to be this way. And then she bursts into tears. Maybe next time, suggest she turns her emotional support efforts towards her son. You know, the one who actually messed up. Update 6. DD2 Preface. Any names mentioned are not real names, they are fake names to make things less confusing. To all of the veteran betrayed spouses who warned me he's done this before, you were right. Very early this morning, I woke up to an Instagram message sent to me in the middle of the night from the affair partner. From a fake Instagram account. I have her blocked on all social medias. Hi, it's affair partner. Just so you know, I'm not the only one. Ask him about Megan. I've got a feeling he's been lying to both of us and felt you deserve to know. How nice of the affair partner, after screwing my husband for 7 months, to suddenly think of my feelings. I screenshotted it, didn't respond, and blocked the account. Ironically, X's name was stopping by at 9 a.m., as we had to go over financial information, go over a monthly budget, and him finding living arrangements locally. I called my sister on the verge of a panic attack, panicked that I just found this info and I'm going to see him in 2 hours. She calms me down, and we try to brainstorm about who Megan can be and how to find out who she is. I sure as hell wasn't going to ask the affair partner. My sister calms me down somewhat and helps me to confront him and record on my phone for evidence. Instead of this being a productive conversation about finances and future arrangements, it's D-Day 2. X's name comes over with coffee and bagels. How nice. We sit down in the kitchen and I ask, so have you spoken to a affair partner? He says he had her blocked on everything, but she was trying to contact him at work last week, and finally on Friday. He had it out with her and told her to stop contacting him. I asked, how about Megan? He looks surprised. Huh? Megan, have you talked to her? He starts saying he doesn't know what I'm talking about, and I just say, you can't keep doing this to me, acting like I'm crazy. Please just tell me the truth. I'm having panic attacks. Can't sleep. Just please. I know you know I know. I need the truth. To make a long story short, Megan is a woman from the organization he joined 5 years ago of professionals who get together to network, get ideas on team-building strategies, growth strategies, marketing. They get together 6 times a year in different destinations. My take has always been it's a bunch of yuppies using business networking as an excuse to go on extravagant vacations every other month. The affair with Megan began in June 2019 and ended in April 2020. He claims it ended because he felt guilty, but I think it really ended because of the COVID shutdowns. Megan lives in a neighboring state but works in the city. At first he swore their hookups were only on these trips, but after some pushback from me, he admitted they met in the city a few times. He said he's had no contact at all with her in over a year because she left the group. But wait, there's more. I asked him if there were any others, begged him, please don't make me find out on my own, just tell me now, I can't do any more of these confrontations. He said there was one more affair partner almost 5 years ago, a few months after we bought the apartment. He dated Cindy for 3 months. They had sex only a few times and ended it because Cindy didn't know X's name was married. She dumped him when she learned he was married. After I told him to leave, I called my sister to fill her in. She asked if I'm going to tell Megan's husband. Yeah, duh. She says, better do it soon before he warns her. I looked her up on Instagram and Facebook, nothing. My sister is also checking. Megan must have blocked me because my sister found her right away. She found her husband on Instagram. I couldn't. Guess she blocked me there too, but I was able to find his work info and work email. So I sent the other betrayed spouse, Craig, an email explaining everything. He called me within 20 minutes of the email. Turns out he caught Megan texting another member of that group last year, which is why she left the group. They've been in marriage counseling for a year. Craig said he knew in his gut there was more, and she gaslit him for the last year. He asked for the recording I made of X's name admitting the details, and we will be in touch. All of this happened before lunch. I'm shocked, angry, hurt. I feel like I don't know this person anymore. Of course there was more. Shakes head. Update 7. I'm a proud mom of a high school graduate as of this past weekend. This last week was full of lots of emotions. His prom was a few days before graduation too. I wish I could say I went into these special moments with a positive mindset, but I failed miserably. I think this would be because when you get to these huge milestones, which aren't just milestones for your kids, but also for yourself and for your relationship, it also brings up memories of the past, as well as all those plans and dreams for the future. And I've spent a lot of mind space questioning memories of the past as being valid or real because of X's name betrayals, as well as mourning those future plans and dreams. It's odd sharing space at what should be a momentous occasion for our kids with the person who betrayed you. It's odd sitting next to your wayward spouse at your oldest kid's graduation, knowing that without this cloud over us, we would be high-fiving each other, saying, we got 1 through high school, 2 more to go. Instead, it was anxiety and silence. It was our 2 other kids opting to sit next to their cousins to avoid their father. It was both of our families, getting together for the first time, who normally are pretty tight and friendly, being tense and awkward. I planned a huge barbecue for my son, lots of family and friends. Our immediate family knows the reasons for our separation, our extended does not, so it felt like putting on a show in a way. The week leading into the party was a week filled with anxiety and racing thoughts, like movies I can't stop playing in my head of the betrayals. My oldest pulled me aside last week and told me he had been talking to his college about delaying his entrance for a year so he can stick around home and be a support system to me. Help me with things around the house and with his brother and sister. I told him absolutely not. He's worked his butt off for 4 years to go to this university and he's going. It makes me so angry at my ex, so angry that his choices, his selfishness, have made my kids feel responsible for me, worry about me, and feel that they need to pick up his slack, make up for his choices. It shouldn't be that way. My ex has finally retained a divorce attorney. He's been informed via my attorney that all contact should be made through attorneys unless pertaining to the immediate needs of our kids, in which case communication will be made through a parenting app. Of course, my ex is not happy with this, as at our son's graduation, he wanted to know why we can't at least be friends. Huh? My response was, my friends don't F me over the way you did. He is still in contact with Megan, a fair partner too, and he continues to get together with her. He claims to have gone no contact with her. I guess he thinks I'm an idiot, like I don't have contact still with Craig. Other betrayed spouse too. I have told him he won't know what hits him if he attempts to bring that woman around my kids. And by the way, I have informed his parents exactly who he's been hanging out with. Call me vindictive if you will, but anyone F's with my kids, even their other parent, I will go full mama bear on them. He claims he would never do that. I said, yeah, there's a lot of things I thought you'd never do, but here we are. Other betrayed spouse. One is ahead of the game more than me. He got his ex-affair partner one served divorce papers at work. They used to work together at the same place she is currently employed, so when she got served, of course some of his old colleagues reached out to him to check in. And let's just say he didn't hold back. Apparently, this put affair partner one into a spiral. Well, that's it for now. For a few weeks I thought I was doing well, somewhat on my way to moving forward, but this last week, I feel like I'm back to square one in a way. Anxiety, mind racing, movies, anger, tears, it has all come crashing back. How are y'all doing? Nothing like a party where the guests are clueless about the storm brewing behind the scenes. And the audacity of your ex wanting to be friends? Yeah, because friends totally do what he did. I loved your response, my friends don't F me over the way you did. If only there was an award for the best one-liner during a breakup. But it's no surprise that this week brought back all the emotions. It's hard to move forward when every milestone is tainted by betrayal. Just remember, you're not back to square one. Progress isn't always linear, and feeling those emotions is part of the healing process. Update 8. The further along I go on this new path of infidelity, the more I am seeing my ex for who he really is, an idiot. It's such a strange experience to have the blinders removed from D-Day, to see the person you've spent 2 decades with for who they really are, an idiot. I can come up with more colorful descriptions of him, but I'm trying really hard to be classy. My oldest son's 18th birthday was last week. He didn't want anything big, so I put together a barbecue pool party for close family, including his aunts, uncles, cousins, and grandparents. And ex, he made plans with friends for later. My siblings refused to speak to my ex, so there was that awkwardness. It was tense, but the party ultimately was a success. As much of a success as I could have expected under the circumstances, considering 18-year-old is not on speaking terms with his father. Let me preface example number 1 of why my ex is an idiot with this. My cousin's son and my son are at the same age. I'm very close to my cousin, and the boys are very close too. My cousin and his son are super into dirt biking. My son would love to be into it too, but it's the one sport I've said no to. However, since the boys turned 13, I've allowed my cousin to take my son with his son for a yearly camping dirt biking trip every summer. They're actually planning to go next week. Anywho, to get to the point where my ex is an idiot, towards the end of the party, my ex presents my son his gift, a motorcycle. Yes, a motorcycle. Of course, he bought one for himself as well. I don't know what to say. I know you like dirt biking, so I thought this would be cool. This isn't a dirt bike, and I don't have a motorcycle license. We can get you one. I am leaving the state for college in a month. What am I going to do with this? Maybe you can bring it to school? Freshmen can't have cars on campus, and anyway, where would I keep it? My son might seem ungrateful here. But what happened next is that he got really quiet and just walked away. This is not like him. He's a pleaser, very conflict avoidant. My ex was upset, asking, "What the F?" My daughter, 16, much more combative than my son, says, "He knows you're trying to bribe him, Dad." And she's right. This is what my ex does. Instead of doing what he needs to do to work on things, he will try to charm his way or bribe his way back into good graces with grand gestures. This time it backfired. Example number 2 of why my ex is an idiot. As he's leaving from the party, I remind him he should make his flight reservations for when we move my son into his dorm next month. He says, "Oh, I forgot to tell you, I can't go. Something came up." Apparently, he is working on himself. He dropped therapy because it wasn't helping him and found a life coach instead. He booked a meditation retreat across the country for that week. I'm proud of myself because I didn't say a word in response. My spidey senses were piqued. I had a gut feeling he was hiding something. He told me he was going on his own to work on himself, to really focus on himself, but my gut feeling was telling me something. And I wasn't going to question him because I've been working really hard at maintaining very low contact. I called Craig, other betrayed spouse too, the next day to check in. I asked him if Megan was going away next month. Surprise, surprise, she's going on a week-long meditation retreat. My ex thinks I'm an idiot, but he's the real idiot. I don't understand how he can think he can ever rebuild a relationship with his kids if he doesn't put the work into it. If it was me, I would be doing everything I could to prove myself to my kids. I'd be showing up, always, even if I had to stay in the background to show them that no matter what, I will always be there, even if they're pissed at me, not speaking to me, even if I make mistakes. I would always fight for relationships with my kids. My ex gets him a motorcycle as a quick fix, when what he should be doing is showing up for major life events, especially if, it's difficult to do. It's frustrating to watch, but what I've learned in therapy is that my ex's relationship with the kids is up to him to maintain, not me. I'm only responsible for my own relationship with them, but God, it's so hard to watch. So naturally, your ex buys him a motorcycle because that makes sense, right? Your son, the pleaser, just walks away. Your ex baffled. Your daughter calling it like it is. He knows you're trying to bribe him, Dad. Nailed it. Hang in there. Your kids see who's really showing up for them, and that's what matters most. And as for your ex, well, he's just digging his own grave, isn't he? But you're absolutely right, it doesn't make it easy to watch. You're handling your side with grace and strength. What do you make of all this? What would you have done? Share your thoughts with us in the comments below.
My name is Jonathan. I've never felt such intense anger in my life before. This anger is something no one should ever experience. At that moment, I had a strong urge to physically do bad things to people. You might be wondering what caused this rage in me. Let me explain. It all began about 5 weeks ago when my wife and I noticed a significant change in her behavior, like a chameleon's transformation. She started showing a lack of closeness, even the usual actions between a husband and wife. This sudden change made me suspicious, as my past experiences with my ex-girlfriend had taught me some tough lessons about trust and truth. Interestingly, I had never mentioned the first girl in my life before, and I doubted that revealing it would have made any difference. As her behavior continued to change in the second week, I felt the need to investigate further. Unlike those who seek outside help for their problems, I'm not someone who relies on others. I prefer to solve my problems on my own. So, during my lunch break, I discreetly followed her from work. To my surprise, she parked at a motel and entered room 104. My gut told me she was cheating on me. It didn't make sense because her job didn't involve client interactions, and she worked in the accounting department. Discovering her infidelity hurt, but not as much as the emotional stress I'd already endured from her insults and rejections. The person she was having an affair with turned out to be a colleague, even though they worked in different departments. There were rumors that he was moving up the ranks in the company. For 2 weeks, I thought about various ways to solve the problem. Eventually, I decided on a direct approach to avoid spending money confirming what I already suspected. I waited patiently for the moment I knew she was with another man behind that door. Despite the strong temptation to confront her violently, I reminded myself not to resort to cruelty. My main goal was to gather evidence. In my current emotional state, I still had the option to take legal action for the loss of love, which would have serious consequences for both my wife and her employer. I had a feeling that the man she was involved with was on the brink of a downfall, and events would unfold accordingly. My main task was to gather the necessary evidence and serve divorce papers to my soon-to-be ex-wife. At the same time, the locks in our house were being changed by a locksmith I had hired earlier. I had also organized our finances for an equal division, and I canceled all our credit cards. The past 2 weeks were filled with preparations, and the final shock was approaching. As for Simone's reaction, I can't predict it with certainty. I believe she will find happiness and may eventually feel guilty. My lawyer, experienced in divorce cases, assures me that this guilt will fade once she has her own lawyer. Regarding my feelings for her, one might wonder if I still love her. At the moment, I feel nothing but hatred for her. Yet, I struggle internally, wondering if she genuinely loves me or if her actions are a mistake in resolving the issue. I have a faint hope of restoring our relationship, but logically, I know it's unlikely. I can't accept a wife who betrayed my trust through infidelity. My confidence in her is completely shattered, and the love I still have for her is a remnant struggling to cope with this rapid change. The motel manager gave me the room key after I handed him a $100 bill and promised not to disturb the peace. Even though my wife and her lover chose this place for their secret meetings, I don't blame the manager. He seems like a genuinely nice person. Interestingly, he mentioned his ex-wife, and there were certain similarities in our situations. I quietly opened the door with the key, entered the room, and left it slightly ajar. I grabbed a digital camera, thankful for receiving it as a birthday gift 3 months ago. I admired its quality but was quickly captivated by the scene before me. She was pleading with the man to let her go, and he was visibly angry as he tried to get up. I decided to capture the evidence, taking a few more pictures as I witnessed her suffering. Simone had tears streaming down her face, trying to hide from him while he continued his disgusting actions. I mentally wished that he would make the wrong move, so my instincts would guide my actions. He demanded to know my identity and warned of physical confrontation. I replied that I was the soon-to-be ex-husband of the woman he was having an affair with. It remained uncertain whose face would be punched. I doubted he could do bad things to me. As he approached me, I shifted to the side, gently put the camera down, and turned slightly to the right to let him approach from the left. Loosening my grip on the camera, I began to turn quickly, raising my hand forcefully. When my fist met his face, he was lifted off the ground by a mix of anger, pain, and trembling. At that moment, I couldn't believe I'd let myself get so needlessly angry. But it seemed like my emotions had overwhelmed my rational thinking. I bent down and checked if he showed any signs of life. When I found a pulse, I felt relieved, which allowed me to relax my tense body for a moment. During this time, I heard Simone talking incessantly. Her words filled the air around us. When I looked at her, I saw that she had suddenly stopped, her voice now muted by fear. It dawned on me that she had never seen this side of me before, this raw and unrestrained version of myself that had been unleashed. I must have looked nothing like the person she saw at breakfast. It was clear that she had betrayed me, and I didn't want anything to do with her cheating anymore. Tears rolled down her face. She sat trembling, hugging herself tightly and avoiding eye contact. She couldn't bring herself to meet my gaze. This behavior had become more common lately, but in that moment, she realized I knew about her actions. The game was up. I noticed a flicker of fear in her eyes when she glanced at me, but she quickly looked away. I informed her that I was filing for divorce, changing the locks in the house, and setting up a bank account with her share of our property. I had given her official notice, making it clear that our relationship was over, and I expressed my gratitude for her lack of contribution. I placed the papers on her lap as she tried to hide under the sheets. She briefly glanced at them and then met my eyes. No words were exchanged. In that moment, an unusual emptiness filled the room, but it was clear that my emptiness would be more painful. She realized that no words could mend the situation between us. It seemed she didn't know how to fix our broken relationship, and it had been deteriorating for longer than just the last few weeks. I turned and left, despite her desperate pleas echoing behind me as I walked out the door. "Wait, let me explain. Please, Jonathan, please." I kept walking, deciding to shield myself from her gaze. Her eyes were filled with unshed tears, and I knew that turning around would weaken my resolve and disrupt my plan. Numerous unresolved issues and problems had cropped up along the way, making me reluctant to revisit the past. What was once a beautiful union had turned to ashes. When I arrived home, a patient locksmith was waiting for me. He diligently replaced all 3 locks on our doors and reprogrammed the garage door opener. I thanked him for his prompt service and slipped him a $1.20 bill as a token of appreciation. Sitting at the kitchen table, a place that used to hold fond memories of a loving home, I reflected on the years spent together. Simone's abrupt change remained a mystery to me, as did her disregard for the qualities she had once acknowledged in me. I couldn't grasp her motivations, but I knew our relationship had crumbled in just 5 weeks. Pain and hurtful words had transformed me into a completely different person. Unfortunately, Simone seemed oblivious to this change, just as I had been unaware of her changes. Suddenly, the phone interrupted my thoughts. Glancing at the caller ID, I saw it was Simone's mom. I answered and greeted her. I identified myself as John. To my surprise, Simone's mother, Doris, told me that Simone had come to her in tears, confessing that she had somehow ruined our marriage. "Curious," I responded. I explained to Doris that the situation was a bit complicated, and Simone would need to explain what happened today. I mentioned that I found her in a motel room and served her with divorce papers. Doris expressed her confusion and said she didn't understand what was happening between us. I conveyed my genuine sorrow to Doris, telling her that I cared a great deal about her and Sam, and that this situation was undoubtedly tough for all of us. I also mentioned that it seemed that things had to turn out this way. Tears welled up as I spoke these words, I held a deep affection for Simone's parents, who had shown me kindness throughout the years of our relationship. Doris's anguish and confusion cut through me. I was relieved that we were having this conversation over the phone. I didn't want them to see me like this. I responded to Doris, expressing my doubts about finding a way to work things out. I continued by emphasizing to Doris that this was a serious issue, a really serious one. The gravity of the situation was causing a rift, and the silence on the other end of the phone suggested that Doris was having a hard time processing this distressing information. I felt empathy for her. Just the previous night, I had shared dinner with Doris, Sam, and Simone had been affectionate and gentle in the presence of her parents. The entire situation had taken me by surprise. When we were driving there, we were arguing. On the way back home, I encountered a distant attitude from John, which wasn't surprising. During the time we spent with Doris and Sam, we portrayed ourselves as the perfect couple to spare Sam from the pain caused by our issues. In hindsight, I should have somehow warned them before taking the steps I did. Sam's health was already fragile due to years of hard work and smoking, which had taken a toll on him. Although Doris was in good health, she was constantly worried about Sam. I deeply regret not letting them know about our troubled situation. A few days later, I received a call from Simone's father, who explained that he needed to discuss something important about his daughter's troubled relationship. He mentioned that Simone had confided in her mother the previous night, and he had been present during their conversation. He asked if we could arrange a meeting to discuss what she had gone through. Due to my strong affection for Simone's parents, I readily agreed to the meeting. During our conversation, Simone's father shared the details of her conversation with her mother and relayed it to me. He expressed his regrets for me serving her with divorce papers and requested that Simone provide more details about what had transpired. He felt that simply stating that I found her in a motel room wasn't sufficient. He wanted to understand why she was there and who she was with. Simone began explaining, saying that our relationship had deteriorated compared to when we first got married, primarily due to my overwhelming workload with numerous projects. She had discussed this issue with her mother, who believed that my hard work would eventually lead to a well-deserved promotion. Simone continued, revealing that there was more to the story at her workplace. Greg, a colleague, had discovered a few mistakes she made in the employee records. While these weren't major errors, they were significant enough to jeopardize her chances of a promotion, a salary increase, and hinder her advancement in the company. Exploiting the situation, Greg essentially blackmailed her into having a closeness encounter with him, despite her reluctance. She decided to take that step to avoid the consequences of her mistake. This was a result of our ongoing relationship difficulties and lack of closeness over the last 6 months. Simone also explained that it was only after that first encounter with Greg that she realized her eagerness to experience what others had already enjoyed. I had been her only partner, and she'd never been with anyone else. She detailed the first closeness moment with Greg, which took place in his office during a lunch break. Everyone else had left, and she stayed behind. Greg surprised her with a small bottle of her favorite wine, along with cheese and crackers. She noted that typically, lunch breaks lasted an hour, and everyone would go to nearby restaurants or street vendors for food. However, she preferred a quick snack from a food cart and going to the park, and surprisingly, no one noticed their absence. Simone shared that Greg turned out to be much kinder than her initial impression of him as a stern blackmailer. This meeting marked a turning point for me, causing me to let go of my preconceived notions about him. Although I knew it was morally wrong, I found myself desiring more of those forbidden moments. While I still loved my husband, Greg treated me in a way that made me feel like his possession, and with him, I shed my inhibitions and became a completely different person. By the end of lunch, I was engaging in things with Greg that I hadn't even considered with my husband. We barely wrapped things up before others returned. As I left his office, my anger towards him had somewhat dissipated. That day, with the taste of him on my lips, I couldn't shake the thought of our next encounter. This thought came unexpectedly. Recognizing my desire for Greg, he also desired more than just a one-time encounter. The next day, Greg approached me to discuss it, and we had another closeness moment in his office. During that encounter, I noticed that Greg spoke negatively about Jonathan. These subtle insults continued for the following 2 weeks when we were together, and Greg even suggested that Jonathan might be unfaithful. Given the situation in our personal life at home, it didn't take me long to adopt Greg's negative view of Jonathan. In the weeks that followed, I noticed myself starting to criticize and belittle Jonathan in front of everyone, except for you and Dad. Deep down, I was afraid that you both would catch on to my behavior, so I tried to keep up the appearance of a devoted and loving wife when you and your father were around. But as time passed and our meetings at the motel became more frequent, my relationship with Jonathan deteriorated, while my relationship with Greg transformed from a simple closeness affair into a full-blown romance. Greg suggested continuing our meetings at the motel as a temporary solution until we found a better option. He explained that his wife was becoming suspicious, possibly because someone at work mentioned how often we were seen together. Even though we worked in different departments, there was no talk of parting from our spouses. Our meetings were purely for physical closeness. Looking back, I failed to recognize the love, respect, and understanding that Jonathan offered me. I chose a relationship based on attraction and desire over the emotional connection I had with my husband. I surrendered myself to Greg without much resistance. Jonathan always treated me with respect, never taking anything without my full consent. Greg, on the other hand, had no emotional attachment to me, allowing him to take control freely. He had a compartment where he satisfied his desires, and his wife provided emotional support. I took Greg's negative comments about Jonathan seriously, which led me to prefer an exciting, closeness relationship with Greg over nurturing an emotional connection with my husband. Looking back, I realized that 10 weeks ago, I made the gravest mistake of my life, and sadly, it's no longer possible to undo it. When Jonathan entered the room on that fateful day, I was shocked and tried to hide desperately. I pleaded with Greg to stop, but when Greg finally stepped back and left the bed, I looked into Jonathan's eyes and saw a complete stranger in him. His behavior was tense and unusual. Without saying a word, Jonathan began taking pictures of us, and Greg, muttering something unintelligible, carelessly placed the digital camera on the nearby table. I was completely shocked by what happened next. Greg, consumed by anger, aggressively attacked Jonathan. But moments later, I saw Greg thrown into the air and collapsing on his back. I met Jonathan's eyes, and shame overwhelmed me, making it impossible to maintain eye contact. I tried to shield myself from the situation, covering myself with a sheet in an attempt to hide. At that moment, Jonathan used hurtful words, calling me corrupt, and casually placed several folded papers on the bed. In the midst of all this chaos, I heard that I had been served with divorce papers. My eyes remained fixed on the sheets, and I couldn't grasp that my husband's anger would soon be directed at me. Fear and humiliation coursed through my veins, making me tremble and feel vulnerable. Filled with shame and regret, Jonathan abruptly turned and headed for the exit, clutching the camera he took from the table. Desperately, I tried to reach out to him, but I was in tears. Although I don't recall the exact words, I felt that everything I said sounded empty. After this unpleasant encounter, I took a long shower, completely ignoring Greg's well-being. At that moment, it didn't matter to me whether he was alive or not. Soon, the motel manager peered into the room and said that Jonathan had purchased a key from him. The manager's disdainful look made me feel like I was beneath him. He spoke about how he found his wife with another man, much like my situation with Jonathan, and that was the main reason he gave Jonathan the key. He didn't need to explain it directly. I understood everything. I had made a colossal mistake. I foolishly lost the most precious thing in my life because I got carried away by a fleeting affair, believing it was something extraordinary. The next day, I went to work, and 3 men were waiting for me in my office. The president, the HR manager, and what I assumed was the company's lawyer. They wanted to avoid legal problems, so they offered me a settlement and let me go. It was an unpleasant situation, but at least it was over. Greg and I no longer communicated after that. It became clear that our relationship was built on deception and manipulation. I learned a tough lesson and vowed never to let anyone take advantage of me like that again. When I left the office, I felt a sense of relief. I might have lost my job, but I had regained my self-respect. From that day on, I resolved to be more cautious and selective about the people I allowed into my life. As for Greg, He would forever serve as a painful reminder of a chapter in my life that I was glad to leave behind. I received a severance package, and that was it. Greg was escorted out of the building by security and handed over to the police. It turned out he was involved in several other serious cases that came to light during the investigation. Greg had significant legal problems, including theft from the company through various means, such as embezzlement and falsifying business trip receipts. These actions added up to a grand theft charge. As a result, Greg's wife decided to leave him. After a difficult decision, they moved with their 3 children to her parents on the East Coast. Meanwhile, Greg remained in jail awaiting trial. Initially, I was asked to testify, but after discussions with the district attorney's office, it was clear that my testimony could do more bad things than good. So they decided not to involve me in the trial. Afterward, Greg's attorney approached me, seeking my testimony to support his client. However, as I recounted the details of how Greg had coerced me into a closeness relationship and manipulated my marriage, the attorney also concluded that my testimony wouldn't be helpful in court. Simone expressed her regret, saying, "Mom, I can't believe I messed up like this." Her mother responded sternly, telling Simone that she had made an incredibly serious mistake. She explained that Simone had not only let down her parents and herself, but had also betrayed her husband, hitting rock bottom. Despite all this, her mother conveyed that she still loved Simone because she's her daughter, but she had lost all respect for her. Sam told me that Doris and he had allowed Simone to stay with them. His voice carried a tone of complete confusion. Hearing this news brought tears to my eyes. I felt for these genuinely good people who found themselves entangled in this unfortunate situation. In retrospect, I had hesitated to inform Simone's parents because I knew it might lead to her getting a warning that could hinder me from gathering the necessary evidence. However, the photos I had didn't hold the key to the court case unless her lawyer decided to take an adversarial approach. In that scenario, I had 6 reliable witnesses prepared to testify about their involvement. Although I used the term affair cautiously, it remained unclear whether Simone genuinely loved this guy or if she willingly engaged in this situation from the very start. This ambiguity was connected to her father's previous remarks, suggesting that Greg had a certain level of influence over Simone right from the beginning of their relationship. Meanwhile, my attorney was handling the case with Simone's employer. As I got ready for a visit to the motel room, my lawyer had already filed the case in court. Surprisingly, within just 20 minutes, he was on the phone with the company's legal department. Their response was mixed, initially delighted, and then in denial. Naturally, the conversation took a different turn when he mentioned the affidavit. Suddenly, the company's stance on the issue shifted completely. Based on the information my lawyer shared, it was highly likely that Simone, her lover, and all others involved would be dismissed from their jobs the next day, unless they could provide a reasonable explanation for their actions. I personally understood that the case against Greg for alienation of affection had significantly strengthened due to his employer's response. We had affidavits from 3 of his colleagues and 1 from her, all attesting to their clandestine activities during work hours. The company's higher-ups had suspected their actions in secret but hadn't confronted them. We had sworn statements from the motel owner and the cleaning lady, totaling 6 witnesses. Additionally, I had photographic evidence confirming closeness activity during work hours. Their motel visits were to avoid drawing the attention of colleagues, as Greg noticed their behavior was becoming too conspicuous. He was well versed in the company's workplace relations policy. My attorney gathered a substantial amount of information, and we even had a printed copy of their company's ethics, actions, and workplace relations policy. It was during this time that I discovered Simone's affair, which had lasted just over 5 weeks before I became suspicious. By the time I encountered them at the motel, Simone had been unfaithful to me for 10 weeks. The revelation of their affair 5 weeks prior was an incredibly challenging period in my life, and was one of 3 similar moments that stirred strong emotions in me. I genuinely hoped I'd never go through such an experience again. When I left the motel room that day, I felt a sense of calm like I had never felt before. Simone lay on the bed, tears streaming down her face, while Greg remained unconscious on the floor. In the hallway, the motel manager approached me. As he handed me the key, he placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. It's tough now, but it will get better. Take time to rediscover yourself, and eventually you'll find someone new," he comforted me. "Everything will be okay." He didn't sugarcoat it, acknowledging that the healing process would be painful and depend on the depth of my love and care for her. "Thank you," I responded, indicating that I had already come to understand this. Simone offered no resistance during the divorce process, making it surprisingly straightforward. Even my attorney and possibly hers were surprised by her lack of opposition. It was clear that she was in great pain, but she never attempted to justify her actions. Once the divorce was finalized, the legal battle with her former employer swiftly concluded. Their sole aim was to make me disappear, and they were willing to cover my lawyer's fees, court costs, and even offer a significant sum to secure my agreement. But since then, Simone has faced numerous challenges. Navigating her circumstances is incredibly difficult, especially living with parents whose lives have been greatly affected by her actions. She bears the burden of seeing herself as an imposter, and it will undoubtedly take her a long time to shed that label. Although she has the opportunity to start anew, I hope that eventually she'll be able to move forward and rebuild her life, easing the pain that currently consumes her every hour. I want her to at least learn a valuable and painful lesson from this experience. Only time will tell the extent of her growth. As for Greg, his imprisonment provides me with a sense of satisfaction, at least temporarily. Maybe now he'll have the opportunity to experience different forms of closeness, hopefully this time from the recipient's side. I can't find any sympathy for him because I don't consider him a real man. It was clear to me that he had a family, a wife, and 3 children. I got to know his wife closely during a tumultuous divorce, and I couldn't help but notice her striking appearance. It struck me how foolishly Greg was behaving. He had everything anyone could wish for, but he recklessly threw it all away, driven by some insatiable desire for satisfaction in his closeness life that his wife couldn't fulfill. After witnessing this, I made a difficult decision to leave my job. My employers were shocked by my abrupt departure and genuinely tried to persuade me to reconsider. However, the personal problems I was facing were too serious and hindered me from effectively continuing my work, despite their best efforts. When they realized my decision was final, they kindly provided a generous letter of recommendation, which I gratefully accepted. I recently started a new job on the West Coast, having moved here about a year ago. While working here, I had the pleasure of meeting a wonderful woman who, in my opinion, is worth holding on to. Though I still have trust issues, we share a common experience, as she was also betrayed by her ex-husband. This shared experience has created a strong bond between us. Life, of course, presents its challenges and teaches me valuable lessons, but I remain optimistic that the situation is gradually improving. A week ago, Simone's father called me with devastating news that I still can't come to terms with. He said that Simone had completely lost her way, and they soon discovered Simone's lifeless body in their own home. It later came to light that she had taken too many pills, resulting in her passing. I expressed my sympathy to Sam and assured him they could count on my support.
Carter Harrison was no stranger to hard work. His successful career at Procter & Gamble had prepared him for leadership, making him an obvious choice when the United Fund needed a new director. Harrison's hands-on approach and strong principles impressed Preston Charlton, head of the selection committee, who was eager to bring him on board. The United Fund had thrived under Bob Allen, but it was time for new leadership. Preston believed Harrison was the right person to guide the organization into its next phase. At a reception hosted by Preston, a woman warmly welcomed Harrison, acknowledging Bob Allen's legacy and expressing excitement for Harrison's arrival. Harrison responded humbly, ready to take on the new role. Preston, thrilled with his choice, introduced Harrison to several guests, including Father Mac McClanahan and Colleen O'Reilly, director of the Second Chance Women's Shelter. Harrison was initially confused about Father Mac being both a priest and married, but Charlton explained he was the Episcopal priest of St. Anne's. Charlton emphasized Father Mac's influence in the town, noting that people sought him out for advice, not just spiritual guidance. Later, Father Mac and Colleen met Harrison, who mentioned his experience at Procter & Gamble had taught him to focus on measurable results, which he believed could benefit the nonprofit sector. He complimented Colleen's leadership and suggested she lead one of his task forces, an offer she graciously accepted. Afterward, Father Mac playfully teased Colleen about her reaction to Harrison's praise. The two shared a light-hearted moment at home, with Father Mac proving he too knew how to compliment his wife. Months later, Father Mac caught up with Bob Allen over lunch. Bob admitted he missed the social aspect of work, feeling overlooked since retirement. Father Mac reassured him that his former team still valued his opinion and wisdom. Bob sighed. "You're kind, Father Mac, but I feel like the new guy wants to cut ties with the past." After one of the team called me for advice, Harrison scolded her, saying she should ask him first before coming to me. Father Mac frowned. "That doesn't sound very helpful." Bob waved it off. "Maybe it's better this way. Harrison has his own way of doing things, and asking me for advice might slow down his transition." Father Mac smiled. "You're not an old relic, Bob. You know more about the United Fund than anyone." After lunch, Father Mac couldn't shake Bob's comments and decided to check in with Preston Charlton. Preston's secretary, who attended St. Anne's, quickly connected him to Charlton. "What can I do for you, Father Mac?" Preston greeted warmly. "I hope you're not here to lecture me for missing Mass." Father Mac laughed. "No, just wanted to ask how our new head at the United Fund is doing." "He's fantastic," Preston enthused. "He's already convincing major donors to increase their contributions. We've got a winner here." Relieved, Father Mac felt his concerns fade. A week later, when he visited the United Fund office to meet Bill Simpson, he barely remembered his earlier worries. He greeted Marge Terrell, who had been with the organization for years, then sat with Bill to discuss their upcoming homeless screening project. Afterward, Bill invited Father Mac for coffee, saying there was something else on his mind. In the break room, Bill hesitated before revealing, "I'm thinking of leaving. Things have changed here, and not for the better." Father Mac lowered his voice. "What's going on?" "It's Harrison," Bill whispered. "He's a micromanager, always watching us. People are scared to make a move without his approval." Father Mac tried to be understanding. Maybe he's just tightening things up after Bob's more flexible style? Bill shook his head. "No, it's worse than that. He's a control freak. He's already driven some people away, and more are thinking about leaving. I've been here 8 years, and I don't know how much longer I can last." Father Mac sighed. "That's troubling, Bill. I didn't realize things were that bad." Bill glanced at the clock. "Break's over. I better get back before I'm in trouble." He chuckled. "No offense." Father Mac stood up with him. "Let's keep in touch, and don't make any rash decisions." Worried, Father Mac headed for the exit. Just as he was leaving, Harrison approached with a seemingly cordial greeting. "Well, Father Mac, what brings you here? A surprise inspection?" Father Mac was taken aback by the sharpness in Harrison's voice. Defensively, he replied, "No, Carter. I've been working with one of your staff on the homeless issue and needed some info from him." Harrison waved it off. "I have the latest data in my office. Come with me." Feeling he had no choice, Father Mac followed him. In the office, Harrison handed over a folder and then looked at him closely. "I hear you've been checking up on me. If you have concerns, come to me directly." Father Mac awkwardly responded, "I'm not vetting you. The United Fund is important to the community, and I wanted to see how things were going under your leadership." Harrison replied, "I appreciate that, but things are going well. If you need more information, just come to me." "Of course, Carter," Father Mac said quickly before leaving, puzzled by the frosty exchange. Later that evening, still troubled, Father Mac asked his wife, Colleen, what she thought of Harrison. "How do you like working with him?" "He's a breath of fresh air," she said. "Carter's meetings are efficient and he's getting everyone on board. Sure, he's demanding, but that's better than endless meetings that go nowhere." "Why do you ask?" she added, sensing his curiosity. Father Mac played it down. "Just hearing that Preston thinks he's doing a great job. He's even speeding up the fundraising campaign." Colleen nodded. "He's resourceful. Bob Allen was great, but he was more of a grandfather figure. I like someone who gets things done." That night, Father Mac had another nightmare, the same one that haunted him for 10 years. In Baghdad, he and his spotter, Rico, were on duty, hunting a sniper who had been targeting their battalion. Lying in position, they communicated via throat mics, but the sniper's location was elusive. Suddenly, Rico spotted something alarming. "It's a little girl. She's been shot in the leg." Rico saw her struggling to crawl to safety, but with no one helping her. Determined, he said, "I'm going in. Cover me." Mac protested, "Let me call for backup." But Rico insisted there wasn't time. He rushed to the girl, picked her up, and turned to run back. Just then, another fire shot rang out. Rico's scream rang in Mac's headphones as he saw blood pouring from Rico's thigh through the scope. Rico collapsed, shielding the girl. "Rico!" Mac yelled. "Can you move? Can you get out of there?" Rico, in pain, responded. "He shot a bone. I'm stuck, Mac." Adrenaline surged through Mac. "Hang on, I'm coming." "No, it's a trap. He's using me as bait, just like the girl," Rico warned. "Don't give him what he wants." Mac froze, torn between helping his friend and knowing Rico was right. "We'll get armor and get you out," he promised. "Sure, Mac," Rico said calmly. Then, after a pause, "Pray for me." "I don't know any prayers," Mac admitted. "I'll teach you. Repeat after me," Rico replied. With a breaking voice, Mac repeated the prayer as Rico led him through it. When they reached "Deliver us from evil," a fire shot silenced Rico. Crying and swearing, Mac searched the area but found nothing. Another shot rang out, eliminating the girl. Mac jolted awake, drenched in sweat, the nightmare as vivid as ever. He slipped out of bed, careful not to wake Colleen, and sat in the living room until he calmed down. The next morning, Colleen found him asleep on the couch. She hated that the war still haunted him, but didn't wake him. She quietly prepared for her day, choosing a professional outfit for her United Fund task force meeting. Before leaving, she left a note for Mac, reminding him of her schedule and mentioning she might be home late due to the off-site meeting. Harrison had booked a fancy hotel for the meeting, something Colleen found extravagant, but understood for its neutral setting and quality service. During the meeting, Harrison impressed her. He managed the group effectively, keeping discussions productive and wrapping up with clear goals. He must have been a great businessman, Colleen thought. We're lucky to have him. As the meeting ended, Harrison escorted everyone out, but asked Colleen to stay, saying he needed to discuss something privately. When she asked what it was, he gave her a room key, instructing her to wait in room 514, and left to speak with someone else. Puzzled but compliant, Colleen went to the room. She found papers and a laptop but didn't touch them, sitting on the couch instead. Time passed and she grew uneasy. Finally, Harrison entered. He nodded approvingly, removed his jacket, loosened his tie, and sat on the bed. Colleen started to sit back down, but he interrupted. "No, stay standing," he said curtly. Colleen was startled but complied. "You're an impressive woman, Colleen," Harrison said after a pause. "You're the smartest in the group, a natural leader. Everyone looks to you for guidance." Colleen blushed, trying to deflect, but he stopped her. "No, let me finish." He stood, circling her, making her increasingly uncomfortable. Then he sat back down. "You take responsibility at your agency, and I'm sure your staff depends on you. But I also know your secret," he added, locking eyes with her. "My secret?" she asked, confused. He nodded. "It's exhausting being the one in charge all the time, isn't it? Sometimes you wish someone else would take control, make the decisions for you." His words hit home, describing feelings Colleen hadn't fully acknowledged. How does he know this, she thought, realizing he was right. Harrison continued. "You want someone to take that burden off your shoulders, to tell you what to do." He stood and moved closer. "I can help with that. Trust me." Before she could react, he placed his hands on her shoulders, and the situation escalated, leaving Colleen feeling powerless. Later, Colleen glanced at Harrison. He looked perfectly composed, as though nothing had happened. Without a word, he gathered his things and left, saying, "The room is paid for. Leave whenever you want." Stunned, Colleen slowly got up and went to the bathroom. Looking in the mirror, she barely recognized herself, trying unsuccessfully to clean her smudged makeup and messy hair. "What have I done?" she thought, overwhelmed by shame. Grabbing her purse, she cautiously left the room, avoiding eye contact with a maid in the hallway. Once inside the elevator, her mind raced. Why didn't I stop him? She kept asking herself. As the elevator doors opened, her thoughts shifted. What will I tell Mac? Driving home, Colleen was consumed by guilt. I've committed infidelity, she realized, horrified. How could I betray Mac? The dread of facing him was overwhelming. He'll know immediately, she imagined, and began to cry. But she reminded herself, it's too late now, you have to deal with it. When she got home, Mac had prepared dinner. Panic set in at the thought of sitting with him. I'm not feeling well, she said shakily. I'm going to bed early. Mac looked concerned, but accepted her excuse. After reassuring him, she slipped into the bedroom, undressed, and climbed into bed. When Mac checked on her later, she pretended to be asleep, though guilt kept her awake for hours. The next morning, Mac noticed Colleen was still asleep and decided to let her rest, thinking, if she's really sick, she should stay home. He was surprised when she called around noon, saying she felt better and was heading to work. Mac smiled, thinking, she's so responsible she wouldn't miss a day. A few days later, Mac was working on a sermon when Mrs. Moore, the church secretary, informed him that Carter Harrison was there to see him. Mac was puzzled, but invited him in. "Hello, Carter. What can I do for you? How's the United Fund?" Mac asked. "Things are fine there," Harrison replied, "but I'm here about a personal matter." "Personal?" Mac asked, surprised. "I wanted to ask about the Episcopal Church's stance on confession," Harrison said. Mac explained, "We confess sins as part of our services, but private confession is rare. We don't have a formal confessional like the Catholics, but I've heard a few confessions in private." Harrison pressed, "Is it true that what's said in confession is confidential?" "Yes," Mac confirmed. "It's called the seal of confession, meaning anything confessed must remain confidential, even after end of life." "Good," Harrison said. "I'd like to confess." "All right," Mac said, curious. "We don't need a special place. My office works fine." "Perfect," Harrison agreed. "I want to confess the sin of infidelity." Mac hesitated. "But I thought you were divorced." "I am," Harrison replied, then clarified. "I seduced a married woman." Mac asked, "Do you want to tell me her name?" Harrison smirked. "No, but you know her." Mac, feeling uncomfortable, pressed, "If you knew it was wrong, why did you do it?" "Just couldn't resist," Harrison said casually. Mac was struck by his lack of remorse. "For someone confessing, you don't seem repentant," he remarked. Harrison, still nonchalant, replied, "Oh, I know it was terrible." Mac, unconvinced, continued, "Is there anything else you need to confess?" "No, just the one sin," Harrison said, almost mockingly. Mac handed him a prayer book and suggested he reflect on his actions and the damage caused. He advised Harrison to read the general confession and revisit the 10 Commandments, especially the 7th. Harrison nodded, took the book, and smiled. "I'm glad I did this, Father Mac. I feel much better now." Harrison left, and Father Mac sat at his desk, trying to process what had just happened. He was surprised that Harrison had come to him, as he had never seen him at St. Anne's or any other church. The request for confession was unexpected, but Mac had seen enough to know that people can be unpredictable. Still, he felt disappointed in Harrison. Everyone makes mistakes, but someone in Harrison's position should act more responsibly. Mac worried about the potential fallout when Harrison's affair came to light, how it would affect not only the people involved, but also the United Fund. He hoped it wasn't with a colleague or employee's spouse, as that could bring the organization down. Why can't people think with their heads instead of their desires? Mac thought. What troubled him most was Harrison's lack of remorse. Why confess if you don't truly feel sorry? He wondered. But he couldn't share his concerns with anyone. The burden was his alone. In the following days, Colleen struggled. At work, she was distracted, and her coworkers asked if she was okay. At home, she couldn't sleep, haunted by troubling dreams. She felt distant from Mac, which scared her. He had always been everything she wanted, loving and supportive. So why did she feel the need for something different? Finally, one evening, she picked up the phone and called. Her hands trembled as she waited. When the receptionist put her through, Harrison answered smoothly, "Good afternoon, Miss O'Reilly. What can I do for you?" Colleen's throat tightened. She barely managed to whisper, "Carter, I need to see you again." There was a pause, and then Harrison's voice slithered through the phone. "Say that again, please, Miss O'Reilly." She realized he was toying with her, but she forced herself to repeat, "I need to see you again." Harrison laughed, sending a shiver down her spine. Father Mac was busy preparing for Sunday services, finalizing his sermon, answering calls, and checking on last-minute details. When Colleen told him she'd be out Saturday afternoon, Mac was relieved. Her absence gave him space to focus on the endless tasks without feeling guilty about neglecting her. That evening, Mac was shocked by Colleen's appearance. She looked pale and stiff. When she sat down too quickly and yelped in pain, he asked what was wrong, but she brushed it off, saying, "I think my period's coming early." She went to bed without eating, and Mac made a mental note to insist she see a doctor. The next morning, Colleen skipped both morning prayer and Mass, which only added to Mac's worry. After church, he rushed home with her favorite fast food, relieved to find her up and feeling better. She dismissed the idea of a doctor's visit, saying it was probably just a 24-hour virus. Mac felt reassured enough to attend a vestry meeting that evening, but his concern lingered. Colleen had always been so strong, and the thought of her being unwell filled him with anxiety. What would I do without her? He wondered as he drove to the church. He thought back to when they first met. After his breakdown in the Marines, he enrolled in theological school. One night, shaken by his first nightmare, he went to the student health center where he met Colleen. She was waiting for a friend, and they struck up a conversation. Her quiet concern and his desire to overcome the horrors of war drew them together. A week later, they ran into each other again, and he asked for her number. They began dating and married during their senior year. Since then, Colleen had always been by his side. If weekends were busy for Mac, Mondays were usually calm. After lunch, Mrs. Moore informed him that Carter Harrison was there again. Surprised, as he'd almost forgotten about Harrison, Max sighed and asked her to send him in. "Hello, Carter. I hope today's visit is different from last time," Max said. Harrison's expression was serious. "Unfortunately not. I've committed infidelity again, with the same woman." Mac, incredulous, asked, "Are you serious, Carter? Why confess if you just keep repeating the same sin?" Harrison replied, "It's true, Father. But this time, she came to me, saying she needed me." Mac cut him off. "I don't want to hear excuses. Confession is about acknowledging your sins and committing to change. If you can't do that, I can't help you." "I'm only human," Harrison said with a shrug. As he left, he added, "Talking to you made me feel better, though." After Harrison left, Mac paced angrily. What is he playing at? Mac wondered if Harrison was mocking the church, or if he was genuinely conflicted but didn't know how to express it. Either way, Mac didn't want to waste time with games when real people in his congregation needed help. What troubled him most was the potential impact on the United Fund, which he had long supported. It needs a leader with compassion, not someone playing games. He considered raising his concerns with the board, but couldn't do so without breaking the confidentiality of Harrison's confession. While Mac wrestled with his dilemma, Colleen was dealing with her own. Guilt over her affair with Harrison consumed her. She knew Mac was a devoted husband and couldn't understand how Harrison had tempted her into infidelity. One moment she cursed herself for her weakness, and the next, she longed for more. She was determined not to contact Harrison again, but the phone rang. It was Carter, his tone demanding. "Make an excuse to your husband. Meet me at the beach this weekend. Be at the Royal Sands Hotel by noon on Saturday. Don't forget to bring your underwear." "But," Colleen stammered. "You heard me. Just do it," he ordered, and hung up. That evening, when Mac got home, Colleen noticed something was bothering him. She asked, but he brushed it off. "Just a small issue with a parishioner," he said, offering no details. Deciding not to press further, Colleen made her own request. "Do you mind if I visit my sister this weekend? She asked me to come down to the beach with her." Mac asked if her sister was okay. Colleen assured him everything was fine and said they just wanted to spend some time together before the season ended. "Sure, babe," Mac replied. "Tell Megan I said hi." That night, Mac struggled to sleep, still pondering his unsettling encounter with Carter Harrison. He eventually decided to visit the United Fund the next day to gather some insight, which helped him relax enough to drift off. Colleen also couldn't sleep, haunted by thoughts of Carter. She rationalized the affair, telling herself it was just a fling, and that many people do the same. She believed it would eventually pass, and she could return to her normal life. She even blamed Mac's position in the church for putting pressure on her to be perfect. "It's not fair to expect me to be flawless," she thought, while also feeling smothered by Mac's kindness. Yet, deep down, she knew it was his caring nature that had drawn her to him in the first place. The worst part was knowing how much Mac needed her, especially after all he had endured as a war veteran. Remembering his painful past and how she had helped him recover only deepened her guilt. In the morning, Mac would find Colleen's pillow wet with tears. The next day, Mac made an appointment with Bill Simpson at the United Fund, hoping to better understand Carter's strange behavior. As he walked down the hall, he unexpectedly crossed paths with Harrison, who asked him to stop by his office afterward. This made Mac uneasy, but he agreed. After a brief discussion with Bill about the homeless issue, Mac reluctantly headed to Harrison's office. Upon entering, Mac noticed Harrison's desk was on a raised platform, forcing visitors to look up at him. Mac dismissed the obvious power play and remained silent until Harrison spoke. "I couldn't miss the chance to make one last confession," Harrison said smugly. Mac immediately warned him that he wouldn't listen unless he was sincere. Harrison, with a smirk, replied, "I haven't committed the sin yet, but I will this weekend. My lover and I are going to the beach and will indulge in all kinds of infidelity." "I figured I'd confess now." Mac stood up angrily. "I will pray for your salvation, but I can no longer be your confessor. You're mocking a sacred rite, and I won't be a part of it." He walked out as Harrison laughed behind him. Frustrated, Mac left the office, wondering if Harrison had a mental disorder. The man didn't want forgiveness. He wanted to boast. On Saturday morning, Colleen seemed eager to leave for the weekend. Mac noticed her nervousness, but attributed it to excitement about visiting her sister. Before she left, he made sure to spend some time with her, giving her a hug and saying, "Drive safe, baby. I miss you when you're not here." Colleen gave Mac a quick hug and hurried into the car. As she started the engine, Mac called out, "I love you, Colleen," but she was already pulling out of the driveway and didn't hear him. Back inside, Mac felt uneasy. The feeling grew stronger, and then a troubling thought hit him. Harrison said he was taking his mistress to the beach. He tried to dismiss it. "Lots of people go to the beach," he reassured himself. "Colleen would never cheat on me, especially not with someone like Carter Harrison." But the doubt lingered, and he couldn't focus on his sermon. He considered calling Colleen to ease his mind, but realized he couldn't ask her directly if she was with Harrison. If she denies it, will I believe her? If it's not true, she'll know I don't trust her, and that could damage our relationship. Another idea crossed his mind. He could call Megan to confirm Colleen's visit. But what if Megan was covering for her? Unsure, he hesitated again. Finally, unable to shake the suspicion, Mac made an excuse to call Megan. She answered quickly and asked, "You're not calling about Colleen, are you? She's fine, right?" Relieved she hadn't noticed anything unusual, Mac said, "No, she's fine. I just realized we haven't seen you in a while." Megan explained she was heading to New York for a week but hoped to visit soon. When she asked to speak to Colleen, Mac's heart sank. Megan's leaving for a week. Colleen had lied. Speechless, Mac barely managed to say goodbye. Colleen wasn't with her sister. Harrison's mocking confession played in his head, and Mac knew where his wife really was. The agony Mac felt was unbearable, reminiscent of the day he watched helplessly as Rico lay dying in the street. Once again, he was losing the most important person in his life. In despair, he screamed, realizing he was not only losing Colleen's love, but also her strength, the support that had helped him heal after the war. Grief gave way to anger. How could she do this to me? He wondered. I've been a good husband. What more did she want? His rage turned toward Harrison. That prick used Colleen to humiliate me. Harrison wanted him to know, but left him powerless to stop it. Why does he hate me so much? What did I do to him? But then Mac realized it wasn't just Harrison. It was Colleen, too. Did she willingly start the affair? Sick to his stomach, Mac rushed to the bathroom. Afterward, a grim clarity settled in. Colleen had betrayed him, not just this weekend, but likely before, just as Harrison had implied. Reflecting on her behavior over the past few weeks, Mac was forced to accept it. It was all true. Mac realized that Harrison's motives for his affair with Colleen went beyond simple lust. If he just wanted an affair, he wouldn't have confessed it. It seemed like Harrison was waging a personal war against him. Worse, Harrison's confessions had put Mac in a difficult position. Colleen's lie about visiting her sister didn't prove the affair, but Harrison's admissions had convinced him. Still, Mac couldn't reveal what Harrison had told him. It was bound by the seal of confession. But was it really a confession? Harrison wasn't remorseful or seeking forgiveness, so why should Mac remain silent? Yet the idea of breaking the sanctity of confession troubled him deeply. Do I have the right to decide if a confession is valid? Unsure how to proceed, Mac decided to investigate himself. He couldn't afford a private detective, but could still look into it. He searched online for beach resorts, narrowing it down by price, and called the most expensive one. When he asked if Mr. and Mrs. Carter Harrison had checked in, the operator confirmed they had. She even offered to connect him to their room, but Mac declined, knowing it was too late. He sank into his chair, defeated. A wave of shame hit him. I haven't even asked God for help, he realized. He tried to pray for guidance or comfort, but the words felt empty. The faith that had once given him strength now seemed meaningless. The only scripture he could recall was Psalm 22. My God, why have you forsaken me? This failure felt like the final blow. What kind of priest am I if even God has abandoned me? Mac thought. I've lost everything, my wife, my marriage, and now my faith. In his despair, his mind wandered back to the aftermath of Rico's end of life. After losing his friend, Mac had become distant from everyone. He obsessed over finding the enemy sniper responsible. Allied intelligence believed the sniper moved locations after each attack, but Mac suspected otherwise. Mac mapped out every location where men had been shot, searching for a pattern. Eventually, he realized the sniper had been firing from the same spot, a minaret overlooking the city, which was off-limits to Allied forces. Determined to end it, Mac devised a plan. He set up a decoy in the same position where Rico had been liquidated, using old clothes and a helmet. and placed himself in a nearby spot to fire at the minaret. As afternoon prayer began, Mac spotted the sniper's rifle barrel poking through the minaret's archway. He didn't need to see the shooter. Aiming where he knew the sniper's head would be, he fired. The Barrett rifle recoiled, and moments later, Mac saw an explosion of brick and mortar as the bullets strike. The sniper's rifle tumbled over the edge, signaling the end of his mission. "Better make sure," Mac muttered, then kept firing at the minaret, emptying his clip. He reloaded and continued firing methodically, well into his third clip, until a squad mate arrived and took the rifle from him. When they later checked the mosque, the parapet was destroyed, and the sniper's body was in pieces. Though his command wasn't pleased, Mac had eliminated the threat and was sent home with an honorable discharge for PTSD, along with the Expert Rifleman Medal. Sitting now, lost in those memories, Mac felt a surge of adrenaline. "I handled it then, and I can handle this now," he thought. "I may not be a great husband or priest, but I know how to deal with enemies." Encouraged, he retrieved his Barrett rifle from the attic. He hadn't used it since Iraq, but after cleaning it, he left it ready in the bedroom. That Sunday at St. Anne's, parishioners noticed a shift in Father Mac. His usual warmth had turned stern as he led the congregation in confession. His sermon, focused on the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, surprised many with its grim tone. Afterward, most people avoided lingering, unsettled by his demeanor. Preston Charlton, however, approached Mac. "Everything all right, Father Mac?" "Everything's fine," Mac replied. Preston, concerned, pressed on. "You don't seem like yourself. Is Colleen okay? We missed her today." "She went to visit her sister," Mac said, trying to sound normal. "She'll be back tomorrow." Preston nodded but was clearly unconvinced. "If you ever need to talk, call me any time." After the service, Mac intended to go home but answered the phone as he passed the reception room. A woman's hesitant voice greeted him. "This is Marge Terrell from the United Fund. Can we meet this afternoon?" Though he didn't want a meeting, duty took over, and they arranged to meet at 3 p.m. Later, Marge arrived looking distressed. In his office, Mac asked how he could help. She handed him a bundle of papers, explaining that troubling things were happening at the United Fund, but with Bill Allen on vacation, she didn't know where to turn. Afterward, Mac made his usual rounds at the nursing home. Returning to his office, he began reviewing Marge's documents when a text from Colleen appeared. "Having a great time with Megan. Staying until Monday morning. Love you." Anger surged through him, and he barely resisted smashing his phone. He stormed out, slamming the church door, and drove to the United Fund office. There, he walked through the empty streets, making notes, before finally returning home, consumed by rage. Monday morning, Colleen got a late start after a restless night. She was already running behind for work, and her back ached from the drive. Recalling the weekend, she remembered Carter telling her to check in at the hotel as Mrs. Harrison, where a key to the penthouse awaited her. "Carter sure likes to live in style," she thought, feeling a mix of anticipation and dread. Everything after that was a blur. At one point, hotel management knocked on the door due to the noise, and Carter made Colleen prove she was fine, asking them to keep quiet to avoid disturbing other guests. On Sunday, when Colleen woke up, she initially panicked, thinking she was late for church, but reality set in, and she collapsed back into bed, guilt washing over her. They spent the rest of the day at the beach, where she felt self-conscious under others' stares. Later, Carter took her to a fancy dinner at the hotel, which ended with them back in the room. On Monday morning, she rushed to clean up and get dressed, while Carter, already ready, gave her a blank look before leaving. Colleen hurried to pack her things and check out, grateful that Carter had already settled the bill. She couldn't stand the judgmental looks from the staff and decided she couldn't go to work looking like this. So she stopped at a store, bought new clothes, and changed in the car. As she drove to work, guilt weighed heavily on her. Did I really cheat on my husband this weekend? She felt torn between wanting a normal life with Mac and the shame of her actions. If Mac ever found out, I couldn't bear it. She promised herself she would never see Carter again, but memories of the weekend haunted her, and she shuddered at Carter's promise to bring more men next time. What's wrong with me? She wondered. I love Mac, so why can't I control myself? Frustrated, she pushed the thoughts aside. I'll deal with it later. For now, I need to focus on work. Arriving at the women's shelter, she immersed herself in paperwork, but during lunch, she realized she hadn't called Mac. She quickly dialed the church office and reached Mrs. Moore, who informed her that Mac was in a meeting and might stay at the hospital overnight. Colleen felt uneasy. Is he avoiding me? She wondered. Is he upset I didn't come home on Sunday? She tried to push aside the nagging thought that he might know about her weekend, as it was too painful to consider. Colleen got home late from work, hoping to catch Mac, but the house was dark and his car was gone. Relieved she could unpack without him seeing, she did laundry and took a long shower to shake off the dirt from her rushed hotel exit. As she dressed, she noticed a long black bag in the corner of the bedroom. Realizing it was Mac's old sniper rifle, she recoiled in shock. Why had he taken it out? She wondered, suddenly anxious, remembering his dark days after Iraq. She tried calling Mac's cell, but it went straight to voicemail. She reminded herself that he often turned off his phone at the hospital, but the unease lingered. Torn between guilt and worry, Colleen struggled to sleep. The next morning, Mac found a note from Mrs. Moore about Colleen's call, but set it aside. There would be time to deal with Colleen later. Just then, Marge Terrell knocked on his door and handed him more paperwork. As Mac reviewed it, a chill ran through him. He quickly called Preston Charlton, saying, "I have another one. I'll bring it to your office before the meeting." Meanwhile, Carter Harrison was at his desk when he received an urgent call from Preston Charlton, summoning him to a meeting. Irritated, Harrison begrudgingly complied, driving to the bank and noticing Mac leaving as he arrived. He wouldn't be so smug if he knew what I did to his wife, Harrison thought with a grin. When Harrison entered Charlton's office, Charlton got straight to the point. The trustees unanimously voted to remove you as executive director of the United Fund, effective immediately. Shocked, Harrison demanded an explanation. Charlton handed him expense reports showing unauthorized personal purchases and inappropriate spending. Enraged, Harrison tore up the documents, shouting that he had increased donations and deserved better compensation. "You can't fire me over small things like this," Charlton coldly replied. "You don't get to decide what's acceptable. It's the sponsor's money, not yours. You used fund money for personal luxuries, like the beach resort last weekend. There was no conference. My secretary confirmed it." Defensive, Harrison argued. "It's a stressful job. I'm entitled to some perks. You know how investments work. You have to spend money to make money." "But it doesn't matter," Harrison added darkly. "I have a contract, and if you try to fire me, I'll sue and drag this out for years." Charlton remained composed. "You could do that, but we'd still win. You'd face civil and criminal charges, legal fees, and possible prison time. But to avoid damaging the United Fund's reputation, we're offering a deal. Sign a document admitting to the misuse of funds, agree to make restitution, and we'll let you resign quietly without pressing charges." Charlton held out a legal document to Harrison. "This is the agreement, Carter. I suggest you sign it. It's the best offer you'll get." Harrison angrily grabbed the document, stuffing it into his jacket. "I'll take it to my lawyer. He'll laugh at it," he snapped. Then something dawned on him. "This isn't just about the expenses, is it? It's that priest, isn't it? I saw McClanahan leaving earlier. He broke his vows and told you about my confession, didn't he?" Charlton looked confused. "I don't know what you're talking about." Harrison, now gloating, continued, "I can't believe it. Father Mac broke the seal of confession. He told you about my affair. I'll have him excommunicated. He'll be the laughingstock of the town." Charlton, still bewildered, said, "Father Mac didn't mention any confession." Harrison sneered. "I confessed I was having an affair, dropping hints about who it was with. And when Mac figured out it was his wife, he broke his vow and told you." Charlton stood up, shocked. "What are you saying? Colleen would never cheat on him." Harrison grinned. "You don't know Colleen like I do. Who do you think I took to the beach last weekend?" Charlton paled. "If that's true, you should sign this and leave town immediately. Mac was in the Marines in Iraq." Harrison scoffed. "That weakling? What's he going to do, throw a Bible at me?" Charlton, desperate, warned, "He's one of the toughest men I know, and he loves his wife more than anything." Unfazed, Harrison stormed out. "You'll hear from my lawyer." Preston, worried, tried to reach Father Mac but couldn't get through. "Don't do anything stupid, Mac," he muttered to himself. Later, Colleen was working when Harrison barged into her office, furious. "Your husband broke his vows. He told Preston about my confession." Colleen, confused, asked, "Why did you even go to confession?" Harrison, smirking, replied, "To put Mac in his place. I laughed at him while telling him I was committing infidelity with someone he knows." Panicked, Colleen gasped, "You didn't tell him about us, did you?" Harrison grinned. "Of course I did. I even hinted I was taking you to the beach. I made him a betrayed man, and now I'm going to ruin him." Colleen's voice trembled. "He's going to eliminate you." Harrison scoffed. "I'm not afraid of him." "He wasn't a chaplain, Carter," Colleen said fearfully. "He was a sniper. Over 50 confirmed eliminations in Iraq. He once shot a man from 1.5 miles away." Harrison looked uncertain. "You're lying," Colleen, now terrified, pleaded. "He brought his sniper rifle home. You need to leave town, now." Harrison stared at her in disbelief. "Why are you so worried? You don't care about me." Tears in her eyes, Colleen replied, "You're right. I don't care about you. But I care about Mac. If he loses someone he loves again, it will destroy him. He doesn't deserve that." Harrison hesitated, twice trying to speak before stopping. He glanced at the people outside Colleen's office, then back at her. Finally, he made up his mind. "You're crazy," he said. "This is all nonsense. St. McClanahan isn't perfect, and I'm going to make sure everyone knows." With that, he bolted from her office and headed for his car. Driving back to the United Fund, Harrison's thoughts raced. He was satisfied that he had humiliated Mac, but furious that the priest had broken the seal of confession. He wanted revenge, yet a growing sense of anxiety made him scan the sidewalks, wondering if Mac was following him. When he reached his office, he found the door open, though he was sure he had closed it. Inside, the room was a disaster. His desk was shattered, papers scattered, and a large hole punctured the wall behind his desk. His secretary nervously approached. "Mr. Harrison, Father Mac left a package for you. He said it was urgent." Harrison opened the package and found a large metal bullet casing. Shaking, he realized it was from a sniper rifle. Inside the package was also a torn Bible page with the words, "An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth," highlighted. Remembering what Colleen had said about Mac's sniper skills, Harrison panicked. "He could be watching me from anywhere." He ducked away from the window, trembling. Hastily, he pulled out the document Charlton had given him, signed it, and left it on the floor before running to his car. Shouting to his staff, "I signed it! Tell him not to shoot!" He sped off down the highway. Meanwhile, Colleen sat in her office, still in shock. After a few minutes, she grabbed her purse and left. "I'm leaving," she told a coworker. "You'll be back?" the woman asked. "I don't think so," Colleen replied, then headed to St. Anne's Hospital, hoping to find Mac. But when she arrived, his office was empty. Mrs. Moore, alarmed by her appearance, said she hadn't seen him since the morning. "If you hear from him, tell him to call me immediately, and tell him not to do anything," Colleen shouted as she rushed out. Colleen's emotions overwhelmed her, and she broke down crying in her car. Desperate, she drove home, hoping Mac would be there. But the driveway was empty, and when she entered the house, she noticed the weapon bag from earlier was gone. Sinking onto the bed, she sobbed, "What have I done? If I've turned Mac into a butcher again, I'll never forgive myself." She sat in the dark for a long time until she heard a car pull up. Slowly, she walked to the living room and saw Mac in the doorway, a rifle slung over his shoulder. She stared at him in fear as he stood silently. Unable to bear the silence, Colleen whispered, "Did you eliminate him?" "I was going to," Mac replied, "but I decided to scare him instead. Preston called me." Harrison ran out of the United Fund like he was being chased, left a resignation and confession. "We won't have to worry about him anymore." Colleen sank to her knees in relief, but fear returned as she asked, "Are you going to eliminate me?" Mac quickly set his rifle aside. "No, Colleen. I could never hurt you." "Even after what I did?" she sobbed. "Carter told me he confessed everything." Mac shook his head. "You know, I can't reveal confessions, but I figured it out. Your behavior, lying about your plans, the hotel, I knew you were there." Colleen bowed her head, ashamed. "It's worse than just cheating. I let him do terrible things to me. I deserve to die." "Why, Colleen? What did I do wrong?" Mac's voice cracked with emotion. "It's not your fault," she wept. "Carter found a weakness in me I didn't know existed. I hate myself for it." Mac knelt beside her, speaking softly. "I know about temptation, Colleen. I faced it too." She looked at him, her eyes red and swollen. "Can you ever love me again?" He took her hands, lifting her up. "I'll always love you, Colleen." She clung to him, sobbing into his chest, but after a moment he gently pulled away. "I forgive you," Mac said, his voice heavy with pain. Colleen hugged him again, but he didn't respond. Slowly she pulled back, confused. "What's wrong? You said you forgive me." "I do," Mac whispered, "but I can't stay married to you." Colleen's face crumpled in disbelief. "But you said you love me?" Mac shook his head, tears in his eyes. I do love you, but it's about trust. I can't forget what you did, and I don't know if I can ever trust you again." Colleen collapsed, sobbing. "Please, Mac, give me a chance. I'll prove I'm worthy of your love. Don't leave me." Mac stood silently, heartbroken. "I wish I could. But I've lost faith in you, in us. You were my strength, but now I can't rely on that anymore. I have to learn to live without you." Colleen lay on the floor, tears flowing, her body shaking with sobs, but Mac didn't move to comfort her. He stood there, watching the woman he had once loved fall apart. The next day, Preston Charlton walked into Father Mac's office and saw him packing up papers and belongings. Preston stood there for a moment, stunned, before finally speaking. "How did it go with Colleen?" Mac looked up, exhaustion etched on his face. "She's staying with her sister for now. She needs time to figure things out, find a place to live." Preston shook his head, sympathy clear on his face. "I'm sorry, Mac. I never imagined it would end like this." Mac turned away, his voice barely audible. "Neither did I." Preston watched as his friend emptied drawer after drawer, his brow furrowing. "What are you doing? Why are you packing?" Mac faced him, pain in his eyes. "I'm leaving, Preston. Leaving St. Anne's. I'm leaving the priesthood." Preston's eyes widened in shock. "Mac, you can't do that. The people need you." "They need someone better than me," Mac replied stubbornly. "I wasn't a good husband, and I certainly wasn't a good priest. I couldn't protect Colleen from Carter Harrison, and I didn't help the United Fund when I saw the signs. I failed." Preston stepped closer, shaking his head. "You can't blame yourself for what happened. Harrison fooled us all, me more than anyone. As for Colleen, well, we all face temptation at some point. We all have to deal with it. I don't understand what happened to her, but she's not the first person to be tempted." Mac gave a sad smile. "Maybe you're right, Preston, but I still feel like I should have done something. Maybe I could have stopped her from going down that path." Preston put a hand on his shoulder. "Mac, listen to me. You can't hold yourself accountable for everything that goes wrong in other people's lives. You did your best with the information you had." Mac's face darkened. "I almost eliminated a man this week, Preston. I threatened him, and in doing so, I blew a hole in the United Fund office. What kind of priest does that?" Preston smiled faintly. "Forget about the building. Considering you got Harrison to sign a confession and resignation, I'd say it was worth it. Honestly, the board wants to give you a medal for getting rid of him, not a bill for the damage." His expression grew serious. "As for threatening Harrison, no one can blame you for being angry after what he did to you." Mac's eyes became distant, his voice bitter. "That's the worst part, Preston. I think God has abandoned me. I've lost faith in him. When I saw what was happening to Colleen, I tried to turn to him for help, or at least comfort, but I got nothing. Where was he when I needed him most? Why didn't he send someone to save me like he did for Lot and Sodom and Gomorrah?" Mac gestured to the papers on his desk. "This is my sermon on Sodom and Gomorrah from last Sunday. Remember how God sent an angel to save Lot before the cities were destroyed? Where was my angel, Preston? Why didn't God send someone to save me?" Preston watched his friend, unsure of what to say, until he softly asked, "What did you just say, Mac?" Mac blinked, as if realizing something for the first time. "I said I would have liquidated Carter Harrison if Marge Terrell hadn't shown up with those expense reports out of nowhere." Preston's eyes widened. "Marge Terrell? Just showed up?" Mac nodded slowly, the realization dawning on him. "Yeah, she just appeared with the documents that took Harrison down. It was almost like she was sent." For a long moment, Mac stood there, thinking about what he had just said. Then, with a deep breath, he began to stack the folders back in his desk. "I guess this is where I belong," Mac said quietly, a faint flicker of hope in his voice.